They say an alpha is defined by power, by the pack that follows, by the throne that bends to your will. But what defines you when the pack turns its back, when the throne becomes a cage, when the woman they call queen is nothing but a sacrifice wrapped in silk? I'm about to show you what happens when perfection cracks and the truth beneath bleeds black. This isn't a fairy tale. This is survival. Stay with me until the end. You won't believe where this goes. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let me know where my tribe is watching from. The chandeliers dripped gold like frozen tears above the great hall of Noctira. Every surface gleamed, black marble veined with silver, obsidian columns carved with the faces of conquered kings, floors polished to mirrors that reflected 1,000 candles burning in perfect synchronization. The Empire's elite moved through the space like predators at a watering hole, all teeth and silk, their laughter sharp enough to draw blood. Queen Elira Voss stood at the center of it all, a statue carved from ice and discipline. Her gown was the color of midnight, black velvet that clung to her frame like a second skin, the neckline severe, the sleeves long and fitted. No jewelry except the crown. White gold, platinum, diamonds that caught light and threw it back like shattered stars. Her hair was pulled tight against her skull, not a strand out of place. Her face was a mask of serenity, beautiful, untouchable, perfect, and completely, utterly empty. She could feel it. The absence, like a limb that had been severed but still ached. Her wolf, the primal force that should have been coiled beneath her skin, ready to surge forward at a moment's notice, was silent, not sleeping, not resting, gone. Elira lifted the crystal glass to her lips and took a sip of wine that tasted like ash. Around her, the court celebrated her coronation anniversary. 5 years as queen. 5 years of standing beside King Arden Virex, the most powerful alpha in 3 generations. 5 years of smiling at the right moments, speaking the right words, wearing the right masks. 5 years of dying so slowly she hadn't noticed until tonight. A hand touched her lower back. Possessive, familiar. Arden. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. To anyone watching, it would look like intimacy. A king whispering sweet things to his queen. But Elira knew better. She had learned to read the subtleties, the slight tension in his jaw, the way his fingers pressed just a fraction too hard against her spine. He was checking, making sure she was still performing, still perfect. His voice was low, smooth as aged whiskey, the kind of voice that could command armies or seduce empires. Right now, it did neither. It simply assessed, "You're quiet tonight." Elira didn't turn her head. She kept her gaze fixed on the crowd, her smile never wavering. "I'm admiring our guests." Arden's fingers flexed against her back. A warning. Or perhaps a question. With him, the two were often the same. "They're admiring you, as they should." He pulled back slightly, enough to study her profile. She felt his eyes on her like a weight. King Arden Virex was not a man who missed details. He had built an empire by seeing what others overlooked, by turning weakness into weapons, by never, ever underestimating an opponent, which made what she was about to do either brilliance or suicide. Probably both. She turned to face him fully, met his gaze with the calm, steady look she had perfected over 5 years of marriage. His eyes were dark amber, the color of whiskey held up to firelight. Alpha eyes. Eyes that had watched men break and kingdoms fall and never once flinched. "I should circulate," she said softly. "There are council members I haven't greeted." Arden's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation. He was always calculating. "Of course," he said. His hand dropped from her back. He stepped aside, a king granting permission. But they both knew it wasn't permission. It was a leash, long enough to let her walk, but always, always still attached. Elira moved through the crowd like a ghost through fog. The courtiers parted for her automatically. Some bowed, some smiled, all of them watched. In Noctira, everyone was always watching. The empire had been built on surveillance, on whispers that traveled faster than wolves could run, on secrets that killed more efficiently than blades. She could feel their eyes tracking her movement, assessing, judging, searching for cracks in the porcelain. They wouldn't find any, not yet. Lady Morel intercepted her near the eastern colonnade, a woman whose beauty was as sharp and calculated as a dagger. She wore crimson, bold, aggressive, the color of fresh blood. Her smile was all edges. "Your Majesty, you look radiant." Elira inclined her head, the barest acknowledgement. "Lady Morel, thank you for attending. I wouldn't miss it. 5 years, such a milestone." The words hung between them like smoke. Elira understood subtext the way wolves understood scent. Lady Morel wasn't celebrating. She was measuring, counting, wondering how much longer the queen would last. Because that was the thing about Noctira. Everyone knew queens didn't last. They just didn't know why. Morel leaned closer, her voice dropping to something that might have been concern if her eyes weren't so cold. "You seem tired, Your Majesty. Perhaps you should rest. These celebrations can be so draining." Elira met her gaze without blinking. "I'm perfectly well, but your concern is noted." She moved past before Morel could respond, her steps measured and precise. Never hurried, never hesitant. A queen did not flee. A queen simply decided when a conversation was over. But inside, beneath the silk and the crown and the carefully constructed facade, something was screaming. Because Morel was right. She was tired. Not from the party, from the pretending, from the slow, inexorable realization that had been building for months like pressure behind her eyes. The strange dreams. The moments when her reflection in the mirror seemed wrong somehow, like she was looking at a stranger wearing her face. The way her body felt increasingly disconnected from her mind, as if she were piloting a machine that was slowly breaking down. And now, tonight, the final proof. Her wolf was gone. In a kingdom where power was measured by the strength of your beast, where alphas ruled and omegas served and everyone else scrambled for position in between, a wolf wasn't just power. It was identity. It was proof you were real. Without it, you were nothing, less than nothing, a shell. Elira found herself on one of the high balconies overlooking the city. The night air was cold against her skin, sharp and clean after the cloying perfume and heat of the great hall. Below, Noctira spread out like a predator at rest. Towers of black stone, streets lit by enchanted lanterns that never flickered, the great walls that surrounded the inner city, 30 feet high and carved with protection runes that glowed faint blue in the darkness. Beautiful. Terrible. Built on bones and blood and secrets. She gripped the balcony railing, her knuckles going white. The stone was cold beneath her palms. Real. Solid. Unlike everything else in her life. A voice cut through the night behind her. "Running away already?" Elira didn't turn. She recognized the voice. Kyle Theron, the king's closest advisor, his enforcer, the man who made problems disappear. She kept her eyes on the city. "I'm enjoying the view." Kyle moved to stand beside her. He was tall, lean, built like a blade. His hair was silver white, unusual for someone who couldn't be more than 40. His eyes were the pale gray of winter ice. He wore black, he always wore black, and carried himself with the casual confidence of someone who had killed enough people that death had become boring. He leaned against the railing, studying her profile. "The king is looking for you. The king always knows where I am." "True." Kale's voice was flat, emotionless. "But he wants you visible. Celebrations require a queen. Then I'll return shortly." They stood in silence for a long moment. Below, a patrol of guards moved through the streets, their armor catching the lamplight. The city hummed with life. Thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, all of them living, breathing, existing within the carefully constructed order that Arden had built. An order that required its queen to be perfect, always perfect. Never flawed, never weak, never empty. Kale spoke again, his voice quieter now, almost gentle. Whatever would make such a contrast with his usual tone feel like a threat in itself. "You should be careful, Your Majesty." Elira turned her head slightly. Careful of what? Kael's pale eyes met hers. Of looking like you have something to hide. The words hit like a blade between the ribs. Precise? Deliberate? A warning wrapped in concern. Elira smiled. The same serene, distant smile she had worn all night. "I have nothing to hide, Lord Theron. I'm simply a queen enjoying her anniversary." Kael studied her for another moment, then straightened. "Of course. My apologies for the intrusion." He turned and walked back toward the great hall, his footsteps silent on the stone. Elira watched him go, her heart hammering against her ribs. They were watching, they knew, or they suspected, which in Noctira amounted to the same thing. She stayed on the balcony for exactly 3 more minutes, long enough to prove she wasn't rattled, long enough to demonstrate she answered to her own schedule, not Kael's. Then she turned and walked back inside, her spine straight, her expression calm. The party continued like a beautiful machine. Music swelled from the orchestra pit. Dancers moved in synchronized patterns. Servants circulated with trays of wine and delicacies. Everyone smiled. Everyone laughed. Everyone played their assigned roles in the great performance that was court life. Elira found Arden near the throne dais, deep in conversation with Duke Varen, the head of the military council. The Duke was a massive man, scarred and brutal, with the kind of presence that made rooms feel smaller. He broke off mid-sentence when he saw her approach, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty." "Duke Varen." Elira inclined her head. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Never," the Duke said, but his eyes slid to Arden, seeking permission to continue existing in the Queen's presence. Arden's hand found Elira's waist, pulling her close against his side. A public claim, a reminder to everyone watching that the Queen belonged to the King. "We were discussing border security," he said. "Nothing that concerns you." The casual dismissal would have stung once. Now it just confirmed what she already knew. She was decoration, a symbol, a vessel for whatever purpose the crown required. She smiled at both men. "Then I'll leave you to it." But Arden's grip tightened. "Stay. You should hear this." His tone left no room for argument. Elira settled against his side. Her body language relaxed even as her mind raced. This was a test. Another one. There were always tests. Duke Varen cleared his throat. "We've had reports of unrest in the northern provinces. Small incidents, vandalism, graffiti. Nothing organized yet, but the sentiment is spreading." "What sentiment?" Arden's voice was sharp now, focused. "That the crown has grown, distant. That the empire prioritizes the capital over the territories. That taxes are high and protection is low." "All of which is propaganda," Arden said flatly. "Of course, sire. But propaganda works, especially when people are afraid. Then we give them something else to fear." The words were spoken casually, but Elira felt the weight behind them. This was how Arden ruled, not through love or loyalty, but through calculated terror. Make the alternative to obedience worse than submission. Make rebellion cost more than compliance. It had worked for 5 years. It would probably work for 50 more. Unless something fundamental changed. Unless someone broke the pattern. Duke Varen was nodding. "We could increase patrols, make examples of the agitators." "Do it," Arden said, but quietly. "I don't want panic. I want efficiency. As you command." The Duke bowed again and retreated into the crowd. Arden's hand remained on Elira's waist, his thumb tracing small circles against her hip bone through the velvet. To anyone watching, it would look affectionate. She knew better. He was thinking. And when Arden thought, people usually died. "You're tense," he said softly, his lips close to her ear. "I'm tired. You're never tired." The observation landed like an accusation. Elira forced herself to relax, to lean into him slightly, to play the role of devoted wife. "It's been a long evening. It's barely begun." Arden pulled back to look at her, his amber eyes searching her face. "We have the midnight toast, the blessing ceremony, the dance, all the rituals, all the performances, all the carefully choreographed proof that the empire was strong, the king was powerful, and the queen was perfect." Elira smiled. "Of course. I just needed a moment of air." "You left the hall." "For 5 minutes. Kael said you seemed troubled, so Kael had reported back immediately." Of course he had. That was his function, eyes and ears, the king's shadow. "I'm not troubled," Elira said calmly. "I'm simply human." The word hung between them. Human. In an empire ruled by alphas, by beasts who could shift and tear and dominate, being human was the worst thing you could be. It was weakness. It was prey. Arden's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Something that might have been concern if he were capable of such a thing. You're more than human, he said quietly. You're my queen. The possessive pronoun wrapped around her like chains. Elira reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. The gesture looked tender. It was calculated. And you're my king, she said softly. Arden caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. His skin was warm, alive, real. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, his guard dropped and she saw something underneath. Fear. Not of her, of losing her, which meant he didn't know. Whatever was happening to her, whatever curse or poison or genetic inevitability was slowly erasing her from the inside out. He wasn't part of it. That should have been comforting. Instead, it was terrifying. Because if Arden didn't know, then the conspiracy went deeper than the throne, deeper than the crown. It was woven into the fabric of the empire itself, and she was alone. The midnight bells tolled, deep, resonant, shaking the foundations of the palace. The crowd hushed immediately. All eyes turned to the throne dais where Arden and Elira stood. This was the moment, the climax of the celebration, the midnight toast where the king and queen would drink from the ceremonial chalice and renew their vows before the empire. A priest approached, robed in silver and black, carrying an ornate goblet that gleamed in the candlelight. The wine inside was dark as blood. Elira's heart hammered against her ribs. This was when it would happen. She could feel it, the weight of inevitability pressing down on her like a physical force. The priest began the incantation, ancient words in a language that predated the empire, words about unity and strength and the sacred bond between alpha and mate. Lies. All of it lies, but beautiful lies. The kind people wanted to believe. Arden took the chalice first. He drank deeply, his eyes never leaving Elira's face. Then he offered it to her, his hand steady. She took the goblet. The wine smelled wrong, bitter, metallic, like poison, or blood, or truth. Elira brought the chalice to her lips and drank. The liquid burned down her throat like acid. She kept her expression serene, swallowing once, twice, forcing the wine down even as every instinct screamed at her to spit it out. The crowd erupted in applause. The ritual was complete. The queen had renewed her vows. The empire was safe for another year. Elira handed the chalice back to the priest and smiled at the assembled court. Her vision blurred slightly at the edges. The room tilted. Not now, not here, not in front of everyone. Arden's hand found hers, steadying her. Are you all right? She nodded. Just the wine. It's strong. He studied her for a moment longer, then turned to address the crowd. His voice boomed across the great hall, commanding and absolute. Let the celebration continue. Music swelled. The court resumed its carefully orchestrated revelry, and Elira stood beside the king, smiling and perfect and dying inside. The rest of the night passed in fragments, dancing, her body moving through the steps automatically while her mind spiraled. Conversations, her mouth forming words while her thoughts screamed, laughter. The sound distant and hollow like it was coming from underwater. And through it all, the sensation of being watched. Not by the court, by something else, something that had been waiting for this moment, waiting for her to break. It was nearly 3 a.m. when the last guests finally departed. The great hall emptied slowly, the courtiers filtering out in waves of silk and jewels and false smiles. Elira stood at the entrance, bidding farewell to each one with the same gracious nod, the same measured words. Thank you for celebrating with us. Your presence honors the empire. We are grateful for your loyalty. Lies built on lies. When the final guest was gone, she turned to find Arden watching her from across the hall. They were alone now except for the servants clearing tables and extinguishing candles. The space that had been so full of life an hour ago now felt cavernous and cold. Arden crossed the distance between them in long, measured strides. He stopped just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. You performed admirably tonight. The word choice was deliberate. Performed, not participated, not celebrated. Performed. As if he knew. As if he had always known. Elira kept her voice steady. It was our anniversary. I wanted to honor it. And you did. Arden reached out and touched her cheek, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. You are everything a queen should be. The praise felt like a eulogy. She forced herself to lean into his touch, to play the role one more time. You're too kind. I'm never kind. Arden's voice dropped lower. I'm fair. I'm just, but never kind. Then you're fair to say I fulfilled my duties tonight? More than that. His hand slid down to cup her jaw, tilting her face up. You were flawless. The word hung between them like a blade. Flawless. Perfect. Untouchable. Everything the Empire required. Everything she was losing. Arden leaned down and kissed her. It was not gentle. It was possessive, claiming, a reminder of ownership disguised as affection. Elira kissed him back, her hands finding his shoulders, her body pressing against his. This was the performance. This was survival. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that might have been desire or might have been suspicion. The two often looked the same in an alpha's gaze. Come to bed, he said. It's late. She nodded. Go ahead. I'll be right there. I just want a moment to myself. Arden's expression shifted. Not quite suspicion. Not quite concern. Something in between. Don't be long. I won't. He studied her for another heartbeat, then turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing across the marble floor. Elira watched him go, her heart hammering against her ribs. When he was finally out of sight, she let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Then she ran. Not toward the royal chambers. Toward the archives. The palace archives were buried 3 levels below the main structure, carved into the bedrock that Noctira was built upon. Few people ventured down here. The air was cold and stale, the corridors lit by enchanted torches that cast everything in shades of blue and shadow. Elira moved quickly, her slippers silent on the stone. She had been here before, once, 2 years ago, researching a trade agreement with the southern provinces. She remembered the layout, the endless rows of shelves, the smell of old paper and older secrets. She found what she was looking for in the genealogy section. Records of royal bloodlines dating back 6 generations. Marriages, births, deaths, all meticulously documented, all carefully curated to present the narrative the Empire wanted to tell. But narratives had cracks, and cracks revealed truth. Elira pulled down volume after volume, scanning pages by torchlight. She was looking for something specific, a pattern, a repetition. Something that would explain why queens in Noctira never lasted more than 7 years. Why they always disappeared around their 25th birthday. Why no one ever questioned it. The first 3 volumes showed nothing unusual. Queens who died in childbirth, queens who succumbed to illness, queens who were killed in political uprisings. All plausible, all documented, all lies. Because the dates were too consistent, the ages too similar, the circumstances too convenient. 25, always 25. Elira was 24. In 6 months, she would turn 25. 6 months until whatever had taken the others came for her. She kept searching, her hands shaking now, pages rustling like whispers in the dark. There had to be something, some record, some proof that she wasn't imagining this. And then she found it, a single page, tucked between the official genealogy records, written in a hand so old the ink had faded to brown. It wasn't an official document, it was a confession. The script was cramped, frantic, written by someone who knew they were running out of time. They chose me for my blood, not my family's power, not political alliance, my blood, the old blood, the cursed blood. Women of our line do not age like others. We do not die like others. We transform. Sovereign beasts, weapons without memory, monsters in the shape of queens. I am 24. I have 6 months. He does not know. The council knows. They have always known. This is not marriage. This is sacrifice. And I am afraid. The entry ended there. No signature. No date. Just terror preserved in ink. Elira stared at the words until they blurred. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps. Her hands trembled so badly she nearly dropped the page. Sovereign beasts. Weapons without memory. Transform. She understood now. Why her wolf was silent. Why her body felt wrong. Why the court watched her with such careful, calculated patience. They weren't waiting for her to fail. They were waiting for her to change. Footsteps echoed in the corridor above. Elira's head snapped up. Someone was coming. She shoved the page back into the volume, replaced it on the shelf, and moved quickly toward the back exit. Her heart hammered so hard she could hear it in her skull. The footsteps grew closer. She slipped through the door just as torchlight spilled down the main stairs. She pressed herself against the wall in the side corridor, breathing as quietly as possible. Voices. 2 people. Both male. Did you check the genealogy section? Empty. If she was here, she's gone now. The king wants her found. The king wants a lot of things. A pause. Then the first voice again, lower now. Harder. 6 months. I know. The transformation will happen whether we're ready or not. We'll be ready. We've done this before. Not with her. This one is different. Stronger bloodline. If the ritual fails, it won't fail. You don't know that. I know the council has survived 6 transformations. We'll survive the 7th. Another pause, then footsteps. Moving away. Elira waited until she couldn't hear them anymore. Then she waited 5 minutes longer. When she finally moved, her legs nearly gave out beneath her. The council knew. They had always known. This wasn't accident or tragedy or curse. This was design. She was not a queen. She was livestock. Bred, groomed, prepared for slaughter. And Arden. She couldn't think about Arden. Not yet. Not until she knew. Did he know? Or was he another piece on the board, moved by forces he didn't see? The question fractured her more than the curse itself. Because if he knew, then everything, their marriage, the tender moments, the rare instances of what she had believed might be love, was a lie. And if he didn't know, then he was in danger too. Either way, she was alone. Elira made it back to the royal chambers without being seen. The suite was dark, lit only by the dying embers in the fireplace. Arden was already in bed, his breathing deep and even. Asleep. Or pretending to be. She couldn't tell anymore. She undressed mechanically, hanging the coronation gown in the wardrobe, removing the crown and setting it on its stand. The diamonds caught the firelight and threw shadows across the ceiling, little fragments of light dancing in the dark. Beautiful, meaningless. She climbed into bed beside the king and lay very still, staring at the canopy above. Her mind raced through possibilities. Tell Arden. Trust that he didn't know. Trust that he would protect her. But what if he did know? What if this was the plan all along? Run, disappear into the night, become a ghost. But where would she go? The empire stretched for thousands of miles in every direction. There was nowhere Arden's reach didn't extend. Fight. Refuse to transform. Find a way to break the curse. But how did you fight something written into your blood? Stay. Play the perfect queen. Wait for the inevitable. But that was just dying slowly while wearing a crown. None of the options were good. All of them required a sacrifice. The question was which sacrifice she could live with. Hours passed. The fire died completely. The room grew cold. Beside her, Arden stirred. His hand found hers beneath the covers, his fingers lacing through hers. Even in sleep, he claimed her. Elira stared at their joined hands. 5 years ago, she had believed this meant something. Now she knew better. In an empire built on control, love was just another word for possession, and she had been possessed long enough. As dawn light began to creep through the windows, Elira Voss made her decision. She would not wait for the transformation. She would not be the Empire's weapon. She would not sacrifice herself for a throne built on lies. She would disappear, not as a victim, as a ghost. And when they came looking, when Arden realized his perfect queen was gone, when the council discovered their carefully prepared vessel had escaped, they would find nothing. No body. No trail. No proof she had ever been real, just a crown left on a pillow. And a kingdom that would finally have to face what it had done. Elira closed her eyes and began to plan. She had 6 months. 6 months to become someone else. 6 months to burn down everything she had been and rise from the ashes as something the Empire could never control. 6 months to prove that the most dangerous thing in any kingdom wasn't an alpha king. It was a woman who was supposed to die. And refused. The first light of dawn crawled across the bedroom floor like an intruder. Elira watched it spread, marking time in inches of gold against black marble. Beside her, Arden's breathing remained steady, deep, the rhythm of a predator at rest. She didn't move. Movement would wake him. Movement would require explanation. Movement would mean another performance, another layer of the mask she no longer had the strength to wear. So she lay still and planned her death. Not the literal kind. That was coming anyway, written into her blood like a contract signed before she was born. No, this would be different. Strategic. A death the Empire would believe because they wanted to believe it. Because a dead queen was easier to explain than a missing one. A dead queen was tragedy. A missing queen was rebellion. And rebellion had to be crushed. Elira's mind moved through the logistics with cold precision. 6 months until her 25th birthday. 6 months until whatever genetic horror her bloodline carried would activate and transform her into something the Council could weaponize. 6 months to become a ghost. But ghosts needed bodies, or at least the illusion of them. She would need help. Someone outside the palace. Someone the Empire hadn't corrupted yet. The problem was that in Noctira, corruption wasn't optional. It was atmospheric. You breathed it in with the air. You absorbed it through your skin. The Empire infected everything it touched. Still, there had to be someone. There always was. You just had to know where to look. Arden stirred beside her. His hand found her hip beneath the silk sheets, fingers splaying across her skin. Possessive even in sleep. Even unconscious, the alpha in him needed to claim, to mark, to own. Elira forced herself to remain soft, pliant. She turned into him slightly, the movement natural, unrehearsed, the kind of unconscious intimacy that came from 5 years of sharing a bed, 5 years of learning how to lie with her entire body. Arden's eyes opened, amber in the growing light, sharp, awake instantly the way alphas were, 0 to 60 in a heartbeat, always ready for threat or opportunity. His gaze tracked her face, reading microexpressions the way other men read books. "You didn't sleep," he said. Not a question. An observation. Elira kept her voice soft. "A little. Enough, liar." The word was said without heat, almost affectionate, but it landed like a fist to the sternum. Arden sat up, the sheets falling away from his chest. Scars crossed his torso in pale lines, testaments to battles won and enemies defeated. He was 42 but looked 30. Alpha genetics. They aged differently, slower, harder. Death had to work for them. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture tender in a way that made her skin crawl. Not because it was false, because it might be real, and real was so much worse than calculated. "Talk to me," he said. "There's nothing to talk about." "Elira," his voice dropped lower. "I can feel when something's wrong. The bond is fine. Don't lie to me." The command hung between them, not a request, an order from a king to his subject, from an alpha to his possession. Elira sat up, pulling the sheet around her shoulders. The movement created distance. Not much, just enough to breathe. "I'm tired," she said carefully. "Last night was overwhelming. You've handled bigger events without breaking a sweat. Maybe I'm not as strong as you think." Arden's eyes narrowed. She could see him processing, calculating, trying to determine if this was genuine vulnerability or strategic deflection. With him, everything was a puzzle to solve, every emotion a potential weapon or weakness to exploit. The problem was he was usually right. "You're the strongest woman I know," he said finally, "which is why I'm concerned when you claim otherwise. People change. Not you. You're constant, reliable, perfect. That word again. Perfect. Like a cage made of compliments." Elira met his gaze directly. "Nobody's perfect, Arden. Not even your queen, especially not my queen. But you're mine, and I protect what's mine." The possessive pronoun wrapped around her throat like a noose. She forced herself to smile. "I know, and I'm grateful." "Don't be grateful. Be honest." She wanted to laugh. Honesty. From a man who had built an empire on manipulation and strategic violence. Honesty from a king who probably had more secrets buried beneath his palace than bodies in his war graves. But she didn't laugh. She touched his face, her palm against his jaw, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. "I'm honest with you," she said quietly. "Always. Another lie. But a necessary one." Arden studied her for a long moment, then pulled her against him. His arms wrapped around her like bands of iron disguised as affection. She felt his heartbeat against her cheek. Steady, strong, alive in a way that made her absence of pulse feel like prophecy. "If something was wrong," he said into her hair, "you'd tell me, wouldn't you?" Not a question. A test. Elira closed her eyes. "Of course." Arden's arms tightened fractionally. "Good. Because I would burn this empire to ash before I let anything hurt you." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they sounded like a threat. The morning council meeting was scheduled for 9. Elira attended as she always did, sitting in the queen's chair to the left of the throne, silent and observant, while Arden presided over the empire's administrative machinery. The council chamber was circular, designed to create the illusion of equality, while the throne sat elevated at the head. Black stone walls, no windows, air that tasted recycled and stale, the perfect environment for secrets. Duke Varen was reporting on the northern unrest, more vandalism, more whispers, the sentiment spreading like infection through the outer provinces. "We need to make an example," Varen said, his scarred hands flat on the table. "Public executions, swift and brutal. Show them what rebellion costs." Kael Theron leaned back in his chair, his pale eyes half-lidded. "Executions create martyrs. Martyrs create movements. You're proposing to solve a spark by dumping oil on it. Then what do you suggest?" Varen's voice was acid. "More surveillance? More whispers? That's worked so well thus far. It's kept the empire stable for 5 years. Stable isn't the same as loyal. Loyalty is a fairy tale. Stability is measurable." "Gentlemen," Arden's voice cut through the argument like a blade through silk. "Both of you are correct. And both of you are wrong." The room went silent. Elira watched her husband lean forward, elbows on the armrests, fingers steepled beneath his chin. The pose of a man thinking, or a predator deciding which prey to take first. "We don't need executions," Arden said quietly. "And we don't need more spies. We need a shift in narrative. The northern provinces feel abandoned because they are. We've focused on the capital for too long. They need to see the crown cares. How do we show that without appearing weak?" Varen's voice carried skepticism like a weapon. "We send the queen." Elira's breath caught. Every head in the room turned toward her. Arden continued as if he'd just suggested sending a trade delegation instead of his wife into hostile territory. A tour of the northern provinces. 3 weeks. The queen meeting with local leaders, attending community events, showing the empire's compassion. Kael spoke carefully. "That's a significant security risk. Everything worth doing is." Arden's gaze slid to Elira. "What do you think, my love?" The endearment felt like barbed wire. Elira kept her face serene, her voice measured. "If it serves the empire, I'm willing. It would serve the empire, and it would demonstrate your commitment to its people." Varen cleared his throat. "With respect, sire, the queen has never traveled outside the capital without heavy guard. The northern provinces are unpredictable. If something happened, then we respond accordingly. But nothing will happen, because the queen will be protected." Arden's voice hardened. "Unless you're suggesting our military can't protect one woman for 3 weeks." The challenge hung in the air. Varen's jaw tightened. "Of course not, sire. We can protect her." Then it settled. "Kael, arrange the itinerary. Varen, assign your best unit. We leave in 2 days." The meeting continued, but Elira stopped listening. Her mind raced through implications. 2 days. Not 6 months. 2 days. This changed everything. A tour of the northern provinces meant distance from the capital, distance from the palace, distance from the council's watchful eyes. It meant opportunity. It also meant Arden would be there. Watching. Always watching. Unless an idea crystallized. Dangerous. Reckless. The kind of plan that only worked in stories or nightmares. But she was already living in a nightmare. Might as well make it a story. After the council meeting, Elira returned to the royal chambers and locked the door. She crossed to the wardrobe and pulled out the box hidden beneath her winter cloaks. Inside were the things she'd collected over the past year, small things, untraceable things. A vial of sleeping powder stolen from the palace physician, a set of lockpicks purchased from a black market trader during a sanctioned shopping trip. Identification papers for a fictional merchant's daughter named Vera, and a knife, small, sharp, the kind of blade a woman might carry for protection but never use, except Elira planned to use it. just not how anyone would expect. She heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy, measured. Kael. Elira shoved the box back into its hiding place and smoothed her skirts just as the knock came. Your Majesty, may I enter? She unlocked the door. Kael stood in the threshold, his expression neutral. He was always neutral. She wondered if he practiced in mirrors or if emotional detachment came naturally to men who killed for a living. Lord Theron, how can I help you? The king asked me to brief you on the northern tour. Security protocols, routes, contingencies. Of course. Come in. Kael entered but didn't sit. He remained standing near the door, hands clasped behind his back. Military posture, always ready to move, to react, to eliminate threats. She wondered if he considered her a threat. She wondered if he should. The tour will cover 5 major cities, Kael said. 3 weeks total. We'll travel with a full security detail. 50 guards. Advanced teams will sweep each location before your arrival. That seems excessive for a goodwill tour. The king doesn't take chances with your safety. How thoughtful. Kael's pale eyes flickered. Almost amusement. Almost. We'll be staying in vetted locations. No public accommodations. Everything controlled. Controlled. The Empire's favorite word. And if something unexpected happens, we adapt. But nothing unexpected will happen. I'll make certain of it. The confidence in his voice bordered on arrogance. But Kael had earned that arrogance. He'd eliminated threats for Arden since before Elira wore a crown. Revolutionaries, traitors, political inconveniences, queens who asked too many questions. Elira moved to the window, putting distance between them. Below, the palace garden spread out in geometric precision, every hedge trimmed, every flower in its designated place. Beauty through absolute control. I have a question, she said without turning around. Kael waited. How many queens has Noctira had? Why do you ask? Curiosity. Dangerous thing, curiosity. Only if you're hiding something. She turned to face him. How many? Kael's expression didn't change. 7, counting yourself. And what happened to the other 6? Various causes. Illness. Childbirth complications. 1 assassination. The records are public. I've read the records. They're very neat, very consistent, almost too consistent. Meaning? Meaning patterns reveal intention. And 6 queens dying at the same age in similar circumstances isn't a pattern. It's a design. The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Kael moved slightly, just a fraction, but his hand drifted toward his belt where Elira knew he kept a blade. Not threatening, just ready. You should be careful, Your Majesty. The kind of questions you're asking can lead to dark places. Maybe I'm already in a dark place. Maybe I'm just trying to find the light. There is no light, only different shades of darkness. And some shadows are better left unexplored, even if those shadows are killing me. The words hung between them. An admission, a challenge, a test to see if Kael would confirm what she already knew. His expression remained neutral, but something shifted behind his eyes. Not quite sympathy, more like recognition. If I were you, he said slowly, I would focus on the tour. Northern provinces, simple people, simple problems. A chance to step away from the palace and remember what the Empire looks like to those who don't live in its heart. And if I don't want to step away, if I want to dig deeper, then you'll find things you can't unfind, and learn truths you can't unlearn, and that knowledge will either save you or destroy you. Kael moved toward the door. Probably destroy you. He paused at the threshold, his back to her. For what it's worth, he said quietly, you're not like the others, the previous queens. They accepted their fate. You're fighting it. I respect that. But respect doesn't change outcomes. Then what does? Nothing. Everything's already decided. We're all just playing our parts. He left without another word. Elira stood alone in the chamber, her heart hammering against her ribs. Kael knew, they all knew, and they were letting it happen. Not out of cruelty, out of function. The Empire required sacrifice. Queens were sacrifices. It was efficient, clean, sustainable. As long as the queen cooperated, as long as she died quietly. But Elira wasn't planning to die quietly. She was planning to die loudly, and rise from the ashes as someone they couldn't control. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. Trunks packed with appropriate clothing, security briefings, route approvals. The machinery of royal travel grinding into motion. Elira played her part perfectly. The devoted queen excited to serve her people. The dutiful wife supporting her husband's vision. The symbol of grace and compassion the empire needed. All while stealing supplies from the palace stores, altering her identification papers, memorizing maps of the northern provinces and identifying points where she could disappear. Because the tour wasn't an opportunity, it was an escape hatch, and she was going to kick it open. The night before departure, Arden summoned her to his private study. Not the throne room, not the council chamber, his study, where he conducted business too delicate for official records. Elira found him standing by the window, looking out over the city. He didn't turn when she entered. Close the door. She did. The lock clicked with a finality that made her skin prickle. Arden remained silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle, which made it infinitely more dangerous. I want you to understand something before we leave tomorrow. Elira waited. This tour is not optional. It's strategic. The northern provinces need to see you, need to believe the empire cares, need to understand that rebellion has consequences, but loyalty has rewards. You represent that balance. I understand. Do you? Arden turned to face her. Because sometimes I think you see this as a burden, a performance you're obligated to give. Isn't it? No. His eyes locked onto hers. It's survival. The empire survives because we maintain the illusion of order. The moment that illusion cracks, chaos floods in. And chaos destroys everything, everyone, including me, especially you. The words landed like stones in water, creating ripples Elira couldn't see but could feel spreading outward. Arden crossed the space between them, slow, deliberate, a predator's approach. He stopped just close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. I need to know you understand what's at stake, he said quietly. I understand. I need to know you won't do anything foolish. Define foolish. His hand came up and cupped her face. The gesture was almost tender. Almost. Trying to run, trying to hide, trying to escape something you think you understand but don't. And what don't I understand? That I would burn the entire northern territory to ash if it meant keeping you safe. That there is nowhere in this empire or beyond it where I wouldn't find you. That you are mine, Elira. Not the council's, not the empire's. Mine. The possessive pronoun wrapped around her like chains. Elira forced herself to lean into his touch, to soften her expression, to become the woman he needed her to be. I'm not trying to escape, she said softly. I'm trying to serve. Good. Arden's thumb traced her cheekbone. Because if I thought you were planning something, if I suspected for even a moment that you intended to leave me, I would lock you in this palace and never let you see daylight again. Do you believe me? Yes. Do you believe I would do it out of love? The question fractured something inside her chest. Because the horrible truth was that he would. Arden's love was possession, control, the absolute conviction that what was his should remain his regardless of consent or consequence. It was the most honest form of tyranny, and the most dangerous. I believe you, Elira whispered. Arden kissed her then, hard, claiming, a reminder of ownership disguised as affection. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that might have been desire, or might have been suspicion, or might have been both. Get some rest, he said. We leave at dawn. Elira nodded and turned to go. Elira. She paused at the door. I mean what I said. About burning the Northern Territory, about finding you anywhere you ran. I need you to understand that's not a threat. It's a promise. I understand. Do you love me? The question came out of nowhere, landed like a blade between her ribs. Elira turned to face him fully. Arden stood silhouetted against the window, the city lights behind him turning him into shadow. For a moment, he didn't look like a king. He looked like a man afraid of losing something he couldn't afford to lose. It would have been easier if he were a monster. Monsters you could kill without guilt. But Arden wasn't a monster. He was a king, which was worse, because kings didn't need to be evil to destroy you. They just needed to be kings. Yes, Elira said quietly. I love you. The lie tasted like ash, But it was the lie he needed, and right now, giving him what he needed was the only way to survive long enough to escape. Arden's expression softened, almost imperceptibly, but enough that she saw it. The vulnerability beneath the armor, the man beneath the crown. "Good," he said, "because I love you too, more than this empire, more than my own life. And that terrifies me." "Why?" "Because love makes you weak, and I can't afford weakness." "Then maybe you shouldn't love me." "Too late for that." Arden turned back to the window, far too late. Elira left the study and walked back to the royal chambers on legs that felt like water. Inside, she locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. He loved her, or thought he did, which made everything so much worse, because now when she disappeared, he wouldn't just hunt her as a king reclaiming property. He would hunt her as an alpha who had lost his mate, and there was no mercy in that hunt, only blood. Elira crossed to the wardrobe and pulled out the hidden box one last time. The sleeping powder, the lockpicks, the identification papers, the knife, tools of disappearance, weapons against inevitability. She packed them carefully into a small bag that would fit beneath her travel clothes. Then she sat on the edge of the bed and waited for dawn. Outside the window, Noctira glittered like a blade under moonlight. Beautiful, deadly, built on bones and blood and the bodies of women who had stood where she stood and accepted their fate. But Elira wasn't going to accept anything. She was going to rewrite the ending, or die trying, preferably both. The convoy left at dawn as promised. 50 guards, 10 carriages. An entire military operation disguised as a goodwill tour. Elira sat in the lead carriage with Arden, watching the palace shrink behind them as they passed through the outer gates. The city was just waking up. Merchants opening shops, street cleaners sweeping gutters, normal people living normal lives, unaware that their queen was planning to become a ghost. Arden sat across from her, reading through reports. Always working, always strategizing. Even in motion, the king never stopped being king. Elira watched him and wondered if he ever got tired, if he ever wanted to just stop, if he ever looked at the crown and saw it for what it really was. A cage disguised as authority. The carriage hit a bump. Elira's hand automatically went to the hidden pocket in her skirts, where the small bag was concealed. The sleeping powder shifted slightly, enough to remind her it was there, enough to remind her what came next. They would reach the first city by nightfall, a place called Thornhaven. Population 15,000, mining town, resentful of imperial taxes but too afraid to rebel openly. Perfect. While Arden met with local officials, she would excuse herself, claim fatigue, a headache, something feminine and dismissible. The guards would be positioned outside her chambers. Kael would be with Arden. Security would be focused on external threats. No one would expect the threat to come from inside, from the queen herself. Elira had mapped it out in her mind 1,000 times. The sleeping powder and the guards' evening wine. The lockpicks to open the window. The identification papers to pass as a merchant's daughter traveling south. The knife for anyone who got too close. 3 hours. That's all she needed. 3 hours head start before they realized she was gone. After that, it was speed and luck. Mostly luck. But luck favored the desperate, and Elira had never been more desperate in her life. "Are you nervous?" Arden's voice pulled her from her thoughts. She looked up to find him watching her, the reports forgotten in his lap. About the tour? About everything. Elira smiled, the same serene smile she had perfected over 5 years. "A little. It's a big responsibility. You'll be perfect. You always are." That word again. Perfect. Like a noose disguised as a compliment. "I'll do my best," she said. Arden set the reports aside and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "If something goes wrong," he said quietly, "if you feel unsafe at any point, you tell me immediately. Do you understand?" "I understand. I'm serious, Elira. These provinces are volatile. The people are angry. I need you to be careful." The concern in his voice sounded genuine. Maybe it was. Maybe he really did love her in his broken, possessive way. Maybe he really would burn the Northern Territory to keep her safe. It didn't matter. Love without freedom was just slavery with better decorations. "I'll be careful," she said. "I promise." Another lie, but a necessary one. Arden studied her for another moment, then nodded and returned to his reports. The conversation was over. The king had said his piece. Now it was back to business. Elira turned to look out the window at the passing countryside. Fields, forests, small villages that looked like scattered stones from this distance. Somewhere out there was freedom. Somewhere out there was a life that wasn't measured in performances and crowns and genetic time bombs waiting to detonate. She just had to survive long enough to find it. The carriage rolled on, taking her closer to escape, or closer to disaster. At this point, they looked exactly the same. Thornhaven appeared on the horizon like a wound in the landscape. Dark stone buildings hunched against gray sky. Smoke from the mining operation stained the air brown. Even from a distance, Elira could taste the bitterness of it. Coal dust and resentment mixed into something that coated the back of her throat. The convoy slowed as they approached the outer gates. Guards lined the walls. Not Imperial soldiers, local militia. Their faces hard and suspicious as they watched the royal procession pass. Arden leaned forward to peer through the carriage window. His expression was unreadable, but Elira had learned to recognize the subtle tightening around his eyes. Calculation. He was already assessing threats, identifying weak points, determining who would need to be eliminated if things went wrong. Kings didn't see people. They saw variables in an equation that always ended with their own survival. The carriage rolled through streets that felt more like wounds than roads. Uneven cobblestones, buildings that leaned against each other like drunks. People who watched the royal convoy with eyes that held no warmth, no reverence, just cold assessment. This was what the Empire looked like when you stripped away the marble and gold. This was the truth beneath the performance. These people didn't love their king. They feared him. And fear was loyalty's cheap substitute. It worked right up until the moment it didn't. Then it became rebellion, and rebellion became blood. The governor's mansion sat at the center of town. Less impressive than a palace outbuilding, but clearly the best Thornhaven had to offer. 3 stories of gray stone, windows like narrow eyes, a building designed for function over beauty, like everything else here. The convoy stopped. Guards fanned out and practiced formation. Kyle emerged from the second carriage and surveyed the area with pale eyes that missed nothing. He nodded once to Arden. Clear. Arden stepped out first. Alpha Protocol. The king exits first to assess danger before his queen is exposed. Elira had always found it patronizing. Now she found it useful. The more they underestimated her capacity for violence, the easier it would be to disappear. She accepted Arden's hand and stepped down from the carriage. The air hit her like a slap, cold, bitter, tasting of industry and anger. Governor Merrick waited at the mansion entrance. A heavy-set man with a beard gone more gray than black and eyes that held the weariness of someone caught between empire and rebellion. He bowed deeply as they approached. Your Majesties, Thornhaven is honored by your presence. The words were correct. The tone was hollow. This man didn't want them here. He wanted them gone before their presence ignited something he couldn't control. Governor? Arden's voice was cordial but carried an edge like a blade wrapped in silk. Thank you for hosting us. I trust accommodations have been prepared. Of course, sire. The East Wing has been cleared for your use. 40 rooms, more than adequate for your needs. Excellent. The king and I will rest before tonight's dinner. I assume the local council has been assembled. They await your summons. Good. Arden's hand found Elira's lower back. Possessive. Always possessive. My queen is tired from the journey. Show her to our chambers. Merrick bowed again and gestured toward the entrance. This way, your majesty. Elira followed him inside. The mansion's interior matched its exterior. Functional, cold, stone floors, sparse decoration. The kind of place where beauty was considered wasteful and comfort was for the weak. Perfect for what she had planned. The chambers were on the 3rd floor, a suite of rooms that had been hastily cleaned but still carried the smell of disuse, dust and old stone and the faint metallic tang of mining residue that seemed to permeate everything in this town. Merrick gestured to the main bedroom. I hope this meets your standards, your majesty. We don't often host royalty. It's fine, Elira said. Thank you. Dinner will be served at 8. The council members are eager to meet you. I'm sure they are. Merrick hesitated at the door. If I may speak plainly, your majesty. Elira turned to face him. Please, Thornhaven is not the capital. The people here are hard, suspicious. They've heard stories about the Empire's compassion, but they've seen little evidence of it. Your presence is either an opportunity or a provocation. Which it becomes depends on what you do next. The honesty was unexpected, refreshing in a way that made Elira realize how little truth she'd heard in 5 years of court life. "I understand," she said quietly, "and I appreciate your candor. Just trying to keep everyone alive, Your Majesty. Gets harder every year." He left before she could respond. Elira stood alone in the chamber and listened to the sounds of the mansion settling around her. Guards being positioned, servants moving through corridors, Arden's voice somewhere below, giving orders in that tone that made disobedience feel like suicide. She had 3 hours until dinner. 3 hours to finalize her plan. 3 hours before she became a ghost. She crossed to the window and looked out over Thornhaven. From this height, she could see the mining operations at the edge of town. Great black pits in the earth where men descended daily and sometimes didn't come back up. The Empire demanded coal. Thornhaven provided it. The arrangement was simple, brutal, sustainable as long as neither side questioned it. But questions were spreading, and questions led to change, or they led to massacres, depended on who answered first. Elira turned from the window and began her preparations. She had memorized every step. Sleeping powder dissolved in wine, lockpicks tested on the window latch, identification papers hidden in the lining of her travel cloak, the knife strapped to her thigh beneath layers of silk, tools of transformation, weapons against inevitability. She was checking the window lock when the door opened behind her. Elira spun. Her hand instinctively went to the knife beneath her skirts before she recognized the intruder. Kyle. He stood in the doorway, pale eyes tracking her movement toward the weapon she hadn't quite drawn. His expression remained neutral, but something flickered behind his gaze. Recognition. Confirmation of a suspicion he'd been carrying. "You should knock," Elira said carefully. "I did." "You didn't hear." Kale stepped inside and closed the door, too focused on whatever you're doing with that window, checking the lock. Security precaution. Interesting, because it looks more like you're testing escape routes. The accusation hung between them like drawn steel. Elira let her hand drop from the hidden knife. She straightened her spine and met Kael's gaze with the calm she'd perfected over 5 years of dangerous conversations. "Why would I need an escape route?" "I don't know. You tell me." "There's nothing to tell." Kael moved further into the room, not threatening, just closing distance, making it harder for her to run or lie or do anything except engage. "I've been watching you for 3 days," he said quietly. "Since the council meeting. Since you started asking questions about dead queens. You're planning something. You're imagining things I don't imagine. I observe. And what I've observed is a woman preparing to disappear." Elira's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her voice steady. "That's quite an accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. The only question is whether you're running from something or towards something. My guess is both. And if you're right, if I am planning to leave, then I'd tell you it's suicide." Kael's voice carried no emotion, just cold assessment. The king would hunt you to the ends of the earth. You know this. You've seen what he does to people who betray him. I'm not betraying him. What do you call abandoning your crown? Survival. The word landed like a stone in still water, creating ripples neither of them could control. Kael studied her for a long moment. Then he crossed to the window and looked out over Thornhaven. His reflection in the glass was pale and ghostly, a man made of shadows and cold purpose. "Let me tell you something about survival," he said quietly. "I've killed 47 people for the king. Traitors, rebels, political inconveniences. Some deserved it, most didn't. I did it anyway because that's what survival looks like in an empire built on control. You don't get to choose morality. You choose to live or die. Everything else is just noise." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're about to make a choice, and I want you to understand what that choice costs." Kael turned from the window to face her. "If you run, Arden will find you, and when he does, he won't kill you. He'll bring you back, lock you in the palace, strip away every freedom you have until the only choice left is the one the council has planned for you. The transformation." Kael's expression didn't change. "So, you know, I know enough. Then you know running won't save you. It'll just delay the inevitable. Maybe delay is all I need. For what? To find another option. There is no other option. The curse is genetic. It's written into your blood. You can run to the edge of the world and it'll still find you in 6 months. Running doesn't change biology. Elira felt something crack inside her chest. Not hope. She'd lost that weeks ago. Something deeper. The last fragment of delusion that maybe, somehow, she could escape this. Then what do you suggest I do? Just accept it? Let them turn me into their weapon? I suggest you stop fighting a battle you can't win. Kyle's voice was flat, clinical. The tone of a man delivering a terminal diagnosis. The council has done this 6 times before. They're good at it. Efficient. You won't outsmart them. You won't outrun them. Your only choice is how you meet the end, with dignity or with chains. Those aren't choices. Those are surrender. Sometimes surrender is survival. Not for me. Cale studied her in silence. Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small vial. Dark liquid that caught the light and threw it back like oil. He set it on the table between them. What is that? Elira asked. Poison? Fast-acting. Painless. You'd be dead in 3 minutes. Why are you giving me this? Because if I were you, I'd choose death over transformation. Death you control. Transformation controls you. Cale moved toward the door. But that's just me. You might have more stomach for horror than I give you credit for. Wait. Elira's voice stopped him at the threshold. Why are you helping me? I'm not helping you. I'm giving you options. What you do with them is your problem. But why? Kyle turned back to face her. His pale eyes held something that might have been pity if he were capable of such a thing. Because you're right. The system is rotten. The council is corrupt. Queens shouldn't be sacrifices. But I'm one man. I can't change the empire. All I can do is give you the dignity of choosing your own end. He left without waiting for a response. Elira stood alone in the chamber, staring at the vial of poison on the table. Dark liquid that promised escape. Final escape. The kind you didn't come back from. She picked it up. The glass was cold against her palm. So small. Such a tiny thing to hold such enormous consequence. 3 minutes. 3 minutes and everything would be over. No transformation, no council, no curse, no Arden hunting her across the empire, just silence. Forever. Elira's hand trembled. She wanted to uncork the vial, wanted to drink it down and let the darkness come. It would be easier than running, safer than fighting, cleaner than transformation. But something stopped her. Not hope. Not love. Not even the survival instinct that had kept her alive through 5 years of dangerous performances. Rage. Pure white-hot rage at a system that gave her 2 choices, die quietly or become a monster. Rage at the council that had orchestrated this, at the empire that allowed it, at the kings who benefited from it, at every person who knew and did nothing because it was efficient and sustainable. And besides, what was one woman's life against the stability of an empire? Rage at Arden for loving her in a way that still couldn't save her. Rage at herself for ever believing the crown was anything but a cage. Elira set the vial down. Not gently. She slammed it against the table hard enough that the glass cracked. Poison leaked out across the wood, dark and final and wasted. She wasn't going to die. Not quietly. Not as a sacrifice. If the Empire wanted her transformed into a weapon, she'd give them a weapon. But not the kind they expected. Not the controllable kind. Not the kind that answered to kings and councils and carefully laid plans. She would become the kind of weapon that turned on its creators. The kind that burned empires to ash. The dinner that night was exactly what Elira expected. A performance of civility stretched over a foundation of mutual distrust. The local council members sat around a long table in the mansion's dining hall. 12 men, no women. All of them watching Arden and Elira with expressions that ranged from suspicion to barely concealed hostility. Arden sat at the head of the table, king even here, even in a provincial backwater that resented every breath he took. Elira sat to his right. Queen, symbol, decoration. The meal was simple. Roasted meat, root vegetables, bread that was more dense than fluffy, food that reflected Thornhaven's character. Practical. Joyless. fuel rather than pleasure. Governor Merrick made attempts at conversation, asking about the capital, commenting on the weather, the kind of small talk that filled space without saying anything meaningful. But underneath the pleasantries, tension coiled like a spring wound too tight. One of the council members, a thin man with the hollow eyes of someone who'd spent too long underground, finally spoke what everyone was thinking. "With respect, Your Majesty, why are you really here?" Arden set down his wine glass. The movement was slow, deliberate. Everyone at the table tensed. "To listen," Arden said calmly, "to understand your concerns, to demonstrate that the Empire values all its territories, not just the capital." The thin man's jaw tightened. "We've heard that before. Every few years, someone from the capital comes north, promises changes, promises attention. Then they leave, and nothing changes. Except the taxes get higher. The taxes fund the Empire's protection. Protection from what? We're 300 miles from any border. The only threat we face comes from imperial decrees that bleed us dry." "Careful." Kale's voice cut across the table like a knife. "You're speaking to your king. I'm speaking truth to power. If that's treason, then truth is illegal." The room went silent. Elira could feel violence coiling in the air like static before a lightning strike. Arden's hand rested on the table. Relaxed. But she knew that relaxation was a lie. He was calculating, determining whether this man was a problem to be managed or eliminated. In the empire Arden had built, speaking truth often looked exactly like treason. And treason had one punishment. Elira spoke before Arden could. Her voice cut through the tension like cold water. "What's your name?" The thin man's gaze shifted to her, surprised. No one asked for names. Names made people real. Real made them harder to kill. "Corvin," he said after a pause. "Corvin Thale. How long have you worked in the mines, Corvin?" 32 years. "And in those 32 years, what's changed?" Corvin's expression twisted into something bitter. The seams got deeper. The air got worse. More men die. Fewer come back up. But the quota never changes. Neither does the pay. We dig until we break. Then they replace us with someone younger. It's efficient. The word efficient landed like an accusation. Elira met his gaze directly. "I'm not here to make promises I can't keep. I'm not here to pretend the Empire is perfect, but I am here to listen. And what I'm hearing is that Thornhaven has been forgotten." "Not forgotten," another council member said. "A broad-shouldered man with hands scarred from labor. Exploited. There's a difference. You can forget something accidentally. Exploitation is intentional." "You're right," Elira said. The admission shocked the table into silence. Even Arden turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. Elira continued, "You're being exploited. The Empire takes your coal and gives back scraps. It demands loyalty but offers no protection. It extracts value and provides no investment. You're right to be angry." "Your Majesty." Kael's voice carried a warning. "Careful." "Why?" Elira turned to face him. "Because acknowledging truth is dangerous? Because admitting the system is broken threatens stability? Maybe stability isn't worth preserving if it requires this much suffering." The silence that followed was absolute. Arden's hand moved to her wrist. Not hard, but firm. A warning dressed as affection. "My queen speaks from compassion," he said smoothly. "But compassion without context is just sentiment. The Empire's structure exists for reasons. Resources must be allocated. Priorities must be set. Thornhaven's contribution is valuable, essential even. But the Empire serves millions, not hundreds. So we're expendable," Corvin said flatly. "You're necessary. There's a difference. Feels the same from down here." Arden's grip on Elira's wrist tightened fractionally. She felt his thumb press against her pulse point, reading her heartbeat, assessing her state of mind. She pulled her hand away, gently but firmly. "I'd like to visit the mines tomorrow," she said. "See the conditions for myself." The request landed like a bomb. Arden's expression didn't change, but she felt his fury radiating like heat. "That's not on the itinerary. Then change the itinerary. The mines are dangerous. Unstable. Not appropriate for a queen?" Elira kept her voice calm, even, but steel ran underneath. "I disagree. If these people are expected to risk their lives daily, I can risk a few hours to witness it. Merrick cleared his throat. Your Majesty, Lord Ardeen is right. The mines are no place for royalty. The air alone could make you ill. Then I'll be ill. Elira met Ardeen's gaze directly. I'm visiting the mines. Tomorrow. First thing. The challenge hung between them. A line drawn. A boundary asserted. The first time in 5 years Elira had openly defied him in public. Ardeen's jaw tightened. His eyes went dark. Alpha instinct warring with political calculation. He wanted to forbid her, wanted to pull rank and remind her that queens didn't give orders to kings, but they were being watched, and forbidding her would prove every accusation these people were making, that the empire didn't care, that compassion was performance, that queens were just pretty decorations without agency or power. So he did the only thing he could do. He smiled. Of course, my love. If you wish to visit the mines, we'll arrange it. Though we meant he would be there, watching, controlling, making sure whatever she saw was curated and approved. But it was still a concession, and concessions were cracks, and cracks could be widened. The dinner continued, but the tone had shifted. The council members watched Elira with something new in their eyes, not quite respect, more like curiosity. A queen who spoke truth was unusual. A queen who openly challenged her king was unprecedented. Elira played her part for the rest of the meal, gracious, composed, the perfect symbol of imperial compassion. But inside, she was calculating. The mines would give her opportunity, distance from the mansion, confusion, darkness, all the elements she needed to disappear, if she could just survive until morning. After dinner, Ardeen escorted her back to their chambers. His hand on her back was not gentle. They walked in silence through empty corridors, guards snapping to attention as they passed, servants averting their eyes. The moment the chamber door closed behind them, Ardeen's control shattered. He didn't yell. Yelling was for lesser men. Alphas didn't need volume, they had presence. Ardeen's voice was quiet, cold, more dangerous than any scream. What the hell was that? Elira turned to face him, keeping her expression calm even though her heart hammered against her ribs. I spoke truth. You undermined me. In front of the local council, in front of Kael, in front of everyone. I supported the people you claim to serve. I don't serve them. They serve me. Ardeen crossed the space between them in 2 strides. His hand caught her chin, not gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. I am the king. You are my queen. That means you support my decisions, not question them, not contradict them, support them. Even when they're wrong, they're never wrong. They're strategic. There's a difference. No. Elira pulled her face from his grip. There really isn't. Ardeen's expression went flat, the kind of flatness that preceded violence. You're testing me. I'm being honest. Honesty is a luxury we can't afford. Not here. Not with these people watching for weakness. Every word you speak either strengthens our position or undermines it. Tonight, you undermined it. Maybe it deserves to be undermined. The words came out before she could stop them. Bold, reckless. The kind of statement that could get you killed. Ardeen went very still. His eyes searched her face like he was seeing her for the first time, like the woman standing in front of him had become a stranger. What did you just say? You heard me. Elira's voice was steady now, past the point of fear, past the point of caution. This empire is built on exploitation, on suffering, on lies. Maybe it's time someone acknowledged that. And you think you're that someone? A queen who's never left the capital until 3 days ago? Who's never seen the mines or the borders or the territories? You think you understand the empire better than I do? I understand what it feels like to be exploited, to be valued only for what you can provide, to be told you're essential while being treated as expendable. So yes, maybe I understand more than you think. Ardeen's laugh was sharp, bitter. You have no idea what you're talking about, don't I? Elira stepped closer, closing the distance he'd created. I'm a vessel, Ardeen, a womb with a crown. The council doesn't value me. They're waiting for me to transform so they can weaponize what's left. And you, she stopped. The words too dangerous to speak, too true to contain. Ardeen's hand shot out and grabbed her arm. hard enough to bruise. His face was inches from hers, his breath hot against her skin. Finish that sentence, and you either don't know or don't care. I don't know what. About the curse. About what happens to queens at 25. About the transformation. Elira's voice cracked. About the fact that I'm dying and you're either ignorant or complicit. Arden's grip loosened. Not much, but enough that she knew the accusation had landed. What curse? His voice was quiet now, dangerous in a different way. You really don't know. Know what? Elira pulled her arm from his grip. She crossed to the table where the cracked vial of poison still leaked dark liquid across the wood. She picked up the glass carefully. Evidence of options she'd rejected. Women in my bloodline don't age normally. We don't die normally. At 25, we transform, become sovereign beasts. Weapons without memory or will. The council has been doing this for generations. 6 queens before me. All transformed, all weaponized, all lost. She turned to face him, holding the vial between them like proof. I turn 25 in 6 months, and when I do, I'll stop being your queen and become their monster, unless I die first. Those are my options. Transformation or death. That's what your empire offers women like me. Arden stared at her, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he didn't speak, didn't move, just stood frozen like a man processing information that rewrote his entire understanding of reality. Then he did something she didn't expect. He laughed. Not humor. Horror dressed as sound. You're lying. I wish I was. The council would never... The council has been planning this since before we married. Check the archives, the genealogy records. There's a confession, handwritten, from a queen who understood what was coming and couldn't stop it. Elira set the vial down. I found it 3 days ago. That's when I knew. That's when everything changed. Arden shook his head. Denial fighting reality. If this were true, I would know. Kael would have told me. Kael knows. He gave me that poison. Elira gestured to the cracked vial. Told me death was preferable to transformation. That it was cleaner, more dignified. He knows, Arden. They all know. Everyone except you. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Arden's face went through a series of expressions. Denial, anger, calculation. Then something else. Something that looked almost like fear. He crossed to the door and yanked it open. Kael! The shout echoed through the corridor. Seconds later, Kael appeared. Calm as always. Unruffled. Sire? Is it true? Arden's voice was sharp. The curse. The transformation. Is it true? Kael's pale eyes shifted to Elira, then back to Arden. His expression didn't change, but something tightened around his mouth. Yes. The single word detonated like a grenade. Arden stared at his enforcer, his friend, the man who'd served him for 20 years, reading betrayal in the confirmation. How long have you known? Since before her coronation. You kept this from me. I was ordered to. By the council. They felt it was need-to-know information, and you didn't need to know. I'm the king, and she's the weapon. Kael's voice was flat, clinical. The council's decision was strategic. Tell you and risk interference, or keep you ignorant and maintain control. They chose control. They chose to lie to me. They chose the empire over your feelings, which is what councils are supposed to do. Arden moved fast. One moment he was standing by the door. The next, his hand was around Kael's throat, slamming him against the wall. Pure alpha rage, the kind that broke bones and ended lives. Kael didn't fight back, just met Arden's gaze with those cold, pale eyes. Killing me won't change what's coming, he said quietly. Arden's hand tightened. Why didn't you tell me? Because you would have tried to stop it, and there is no stopping it. The curse is genetic, inevitable. All we can control is how we use what comes after. She's my wife. She's a weapon. One that will serve the empire for decades after you're dead. The council planned this, bred for it, waited for it. Your marriage was strategy, not coincidence. Arden released him, stepped back. His hands shaking with rage, barely contained. Get out. Kael straightened his collar. Sire, get out before I kill you anyway. Kael bowed slightly and left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Arden stood in the center of the room, breathing hard. The invincible Alpha King reduced to a man who just discovered his entire life was a lie. Elira watched him, waiting, not sure if she should speak or stay silent. Finally, Arden turned to face her. His eyes were dark, haunted. "How long have you known?" 3 days. "And you were going to run, not a question, an observation." Elira nodded. "Yes." "Where?" "Anywhere. Everywhere. Just away." "There is no away. Not for you. Not with 6 months left." Arden's voice was hollow. "The curse will find you. The transformation will happen. Running just means you'll be alone when it does. Better alone than weaponized." "Is it?" Arden crossed to her, stood close enough that she could see the fractures in his composure. "Better to lose yourself in the wilderness than let me help you? You can't help me. Nobody can. This is written into my blood. Then we rewrite it. How? I don't know yet. But I'm the king. I command resources, power. If there's a way to break this curse, I'll find it." Elira wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love could overcome biology, that power could defeat genetics, that somehow, impossibly, he could save her. But she'd learned something vital in 5 years of palace life. Wanting something doesn't make it real. And kings were better at conquest than salvation. "There's no cure," she said quietly. Kael said the council has done this 6 times before. If there was a way to stop it, they would have found it. The council wants you to transform. That doesn't mean it's inevitable. It means they've never had reason to prevent it. "And you do?" "Yes." Arden's hands cupped her face. Gentle now, desperate. "You're mine, Elira. I don't give up what's mine. Not to councils, not to curses, not to anything." The possessive pronoun should have bothered her. Instead, it was the first thing that felt like hope in 3 days. But hope was dangerous. Hope made you vulnerable. And vulnerability in an empire built on strength was just suicide with extra steps. "What do we do?" Elira asked. Arden's expression hardened, transformed from desperate husband back to calculating king. "We go to the mines tomorrow like you wanted. We maintain appearances. We don't let the council know that I know. And we buy time while I figure out how to save you. And if you can't, then we burn the empire down and rule over the ashes." He said it like a promise, like a threat, like both. And for the first time since finding that confession in the archives, Elira felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope, not quite, but close enough. They stood together in the chamber, king and queen, alpha and weapon. 2 people caught in a system designed to destroy one and use the other. Outside, Thornhaven settled into uneasy sleep. Tomorrow they would descend into the mines, into darkness, into the belly of an empire built on exploitation and lies. And somewhere in that darkness, Elira would make her choice. Trust Arden to save her, or save herself. The question was which one led to survival, and which one led to transformation. Because in an empire that turned queens into monsters, survival and transformation might be the same thing. Dawn came to Thornhaven like a wound opening, gray light seeping through smoke-stained sky. The kind of morning that felt less like beginning and more like continuation of something that had never properly ended. Elira woke to find Arden already dressed, standing by the window, watching the mining operations in the distance. His shoulders were rigid, coiled tension disguised as stillness. He hadn't slept. She could tell by the way he held himself, the slight tremor in his hands that he kept clenched into fists. Alpha endurance was legendary, but even legends had limits, and discovering your entire marriage was orchestrated by a council breeding weapons out of women would test anyone's capacity for rest. "We leave in an hour," Arden said without turning around. His voice was flat, empty of everything except control. Elira sat up. The sheets fell away from her shoulders. Cold air bit her skin. "I'll be ready." "No, you won't." Arden finally turned to face her. His eyes were dark, haunted by something that looked like decision. "You're not going to the mines. We agreed." "I agreed to maintain appearances. The appearance has been maintained. Now we're changing course." "To what?" "Survival." Arden crossed to the bed, sat on the edge, close enough to touch but not touching. "We're leaving Thornhaven. Today. Returning to the capital where I can access resources, researchers, the Royal Archives, everything I need to find a way to break this curse. The Council will know something's wrong. Let them know. I'm done playing their game. You can't just abandon a diplomatic tour. It'll look like weakness. I don't care how it looks. Arden's voice was sharp now, edged with something that sounded like desperation wearing a king's authority. You have 6 months. 6. Every day we waste here is a day I could be saving you. Or it's a day the Council uses to tighten their control, to eliminate options, to ensure the transformation happens exactly as planned. Elira met his gaze. Running back to the capital doesn't solve anything. It just puts us back in their territory, back where they have all the power. I have power. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, they've been controlling you for 5 years. Controlling us. They built this trap so perfectly you didn't even see the bars. Arden's jaw tightened. That changes now. How? What's your plan? Storm into the council chamber and demand answers? They'll lie. They'll deflect. They'll remind you that queens serve the empire and the empire's needs supersede individual lives. And you'll be right back where you started, except now they know you know. Then what do you suggest? Elira had been thinking about this all night, turning possibilities over in her mind like stones, looking for the option that didn't end with her transformation or Arden's destruction or both. There was only one path she could see. Dangerous. Reckless. The kind of plan that only worked if you were willing to burn everything down. Which she was. We go to the mines as planned, she said carefully. We maintain the performance. We give the council no reason to suspect anything has changed. And while we're down there, in the dark, away from watchers and guards and carefully controlled environments, we disappear. You want to run. I want to survive. There's a difference. Running is not surviving, it's delaying. The curse doesn't care where you are when it activates. Maybe not. But being away from the council when it happens means they can't use what I become. If I transform in the wilderness, I'm just a beast. Dangerous, but not weaponized. They lose their weapon, their plan fails, and you lose yourself. I'm already losing myself. Elira's voice cracked. Every day I feel it, the emptiness where my wolf used to be. The disconnection from my own body. I'm disappearing piece by piece. At least if I run, I control the environment. I choose where I end, not them. Arden stared at her, processing, calculating, the king warring with the husband. Finally, he spoke. No. The word was flat, final, a door closing. Elira felt something cold settle in her stomach. What do you mean, no? I mean, I'm not letting you disappear into the wilderness to transform alone. I'm not letting you face this without me. And I'm sure as hell not letting the council win by default. Then what's your alternative? We go back to the capital. I confront the council. I demand access to every record, every research document, every scrap of information about this curse. And I find a cure. There is no cure. You don't know that. 6 generations of queens say otherwise. 6 generations of queens who didn't have me fighting for them. Arden's hands found hers, gripped tight. You're not alone in this anymore. You have me. You have my resources, my power, everything I've built. I will burn it all down before I let them take you. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they sounded like the kind of promise that ended empires. And Elira understood something fundamental in that moment. Something about power and love and the dangerous intersection where the two became indistinguishable from destruction. Arden would destroy the empire to save her, which meant the empire would destroy him to stop her, and she would lose him either way. The mathematics were simple, brutal, inescapable, so she made her choice. The only choice that didn't end with both of them dead or broken or transformed into weapons the council could use against each other. Okay, she said quietly. We'll do it your way. Arden's expression softened, relief bleeding through the cracks in his control. Thank you. Elira smiled. The same serene smile she'd perfected over 5 years. But visit the mines first, 1 hour. Let me see what these people endure. Then we'll leave. Arden hesitated, then nodded. 1 hour. Then we go. She leaned forward and kissed him, soft, tender. The kind of kiss that said, I love you and I trust you and everything will be okay. All lies, but necessary ones. Because in an hour, Elira would be gone, and Arden would have to decide if he was king enough to let her go, or alpha enough to hunt her down. The thing about lies is they work best when they're wrapped in truth, when the performance is so close to reality that even the person being deceived wants to believe it. Elira had learned this over 5 years of marriage to a man who could read micro-expressions like other people read books. She had learned to lie with her entire body, with her heartbeat, with the dilation of her pupils, with the slight flush that spread across her cheeks when she said his name. She had become a perfect liar, which made her the most dangerous kind of queen. The descent into the mines began at 8. 50 guards formed a perimeter around the entrance. Kael supervised security with cold efficiency, checking sight lines, assessing threats, making sure nothing unexpected could happen. He didn't know that unexpected was exactly what Elira had planned. Governor Merrick met them at the shaft entrance. He looked even more exhausted in daylight, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders bent like a man carrying weight that never got lighter. "Your Majesties, the mine is ready for your inspection. We've cleared the main shaft, reinforced the supports. It's as safe as we can make it." "How safe is that?" Arden's voice carried skepticism. "Safer than usual." Merrick's honesty was almost refreshing. "The mines are old, the infrastructure is failing, we do what we can with what we have, which isn't much. How many men work down there?" 300 on the day shift, another 200 at night. They work 12-hour rotations, 6 days a week. "And how many don't come back up?" Merrick's expression went flat. "Last year? 47. This year we're at 32 so far." The numbers landed like stones. 47 lives. 32. Reduced to statistics in an empire that valued coal more than the people who mined it. There's a lesson in that arithmetic, a truth about how empires measure worth. Human life gets weighed against production quotas. Dignity gets balanced against efficiency. And somewhere in that cold calculation, people stop being people and become resources to be extracted until depletion. 47 men died so the capital could stay warm. 32 and counting this year. And the empire called that acceptable losses, called it sustainable, called it the price of progress. But sustainability built on corpses isn't progress. It's just slow-motion murder with better public relations. Arden's jaw tightened. "We need to discuss safety improvements. We need a lot of things, sire. Money, equipment, time, none of which the empire provides." The accusation hung in the air. Polite, respectful, but cutting underneath. Kael stepped forward. "We should begin. Daylight is limited." The shaft entrance was a wound in the earth, black and deep and exhaling cold air that smelled of stone and sweat and something else. Something that tasted like desperation. Elira stared into the darkness and felt it stare back. This was where men went to break themselves for coal that heated palaces they would never enter. This was the truth beneath the marble and gold. This was what empire looked like when you stripped away the performance. Exploitation measured in bodies. Sustainability measured in acceptable losses. Progress measured in how many deaths you could justify as necessary. "Shall we?" Merrick gestured toward the lift, a wooden platform suspended by chains that looked older than Elira. "It'll take us down to the 3rd level. That's where most of the current excavation is happening." Arden went first. Alpha Protocol. The king faces danger before his queen. Elira followed, then Kael, then Merrick, and 4 guards. The rest of the security detail remained above, which was exactly what Elira needed. The lift descended with a groan of protesting metal. Darkness swallowed them inch by inch. The light from above became a shrinking circle, then a pinpoint, then memory. They dropped into black. Elira's heart hammered against her ribs. Not from fear, from anticipation. She had planned this descent, mapped it, memorized the routes from the mining schematics she'd stolen from Merrick's office 2 nights ago while everyone slept. She knew where the secondary shafts branched off, knew which tunnels led to abandoned sections, knew which paths would take her away from guards and kings and councils and curses. All she needed was opportunity. The lift jerked to a stop. Merrick pulled open the gate. 3rd level. Mind your step. The floor is uneven. They emerged into a tunnel carved from living rock. Narrow, low-ceilinged, supported by wooden beams that creaked under the weight of the earth above. Lanterns hung at intervals, casting more shadow than light. Men worked in the dimness, swinging pickaxes, loading coal into carts, moving with the mechanical efficiency of people who had long since stopped thinking about what they were doing, just surviving, just enduring, just making it through another shift. They looked up as the royal party passed. Their expressions were hard, unreadable. These men didn't love their king, they tolerated him, which was a very different thing. Tolerance ended when the cost became too high, and costs were rising. Elira could feel it in the air. Tension coiled like a spring wound breaking. One spark, one provocation, one moment of push too far and this entire mine would erupt. Not in her favor, not in anyone's. Just blood and chaos and the kind of violence that happened when people had nothing left to lose. They walked deeper into the tunnel. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe. Elira's lungs burned. She understood why 47 men hadn't made it out last year. The mine itself was a predator, slow, patient, devouring lives one breath at a time. How deep does this go? Arden's voice echoed off stone walls. 7 levels, Merrick said. We're only mining the 3rd and 4th now. The lower levels flooded years ago, too expensive to pump out. And the upper levels? Exhausted, stripped clean. This is all that's left. What happens when the 3rd and 4th are exhausted? Merrick's silence was answer enough. The Empire would move on, find another mine, another town, another resource to extract until depletion. Thornhaven would become a ghost town, abandoned, forgotten. The men who had broken themselves here would be left with lungs full of coal dust and no compensation, no pensions, no gratitude. Just the knowledge that they had been used up and discarded. That was the Empire's true genius. It didn't need to be cruel. It just needed to be efficient. And efficiency looked exactly like cruelty when you were the one being processed. Elira stopped walking. She had spotted what she was looking for. A side tunnel, narrow, dark, branching off into sections the royal tour wouldn't visit. What's down there, she asked. Merrick followed her gaze. Abandoned shaft. Collapsed 3 years ago. Not safe. Can I see it? Your Majesty, there's nothing to see. Just rubble and bad air. I'd still like to look. Arden's hand found her elbow. Elira, we should stay with the group. It's just a quick look. 30 seconds. Kale moved closer. His pale eyes tracked her like a predator sensing prey. I'll accompany Her Majesty. That won't be necessary. It wasn't a request. Kale's voice was flat. I go where you go. Elira met his gaze, saw recognition there. He knew. Not the specifics, not the plan. But he knew she was planning something. And he was positioned to stop it, which meant she needed a different approach. She turned to Arden, smiled, soft, trusting. Actually, I'd prefer if you came with me, just the two of us. One moment alone. Arden's expression shifted, suspicion warring with something else. The desire to believe she trusted him. The need to think he still had her loyalty. He nodded to Kael. Stay with the governor. We'll be right back. Sire? That's an order. Kael's jaw tightened, but he stepped back, letting them go. Elira and Arden walked into the abandoned shaft together. The darkness closed around them like water. The sounds from the main tunnel faded to echoes. They were alone. Finally. Arden turned to face her, his features barely visible in the dim light bleeding from the main shaft. What are we really doing here? Elira took a breath. The air tasted like coal dust and decisions. I'm saying goodbye. The words hung between them like drawn blades. Arden went very still. What? I can't go back to the capital. I can't let you confront the council. I can't let you sacrifice everything trying to save something that can't be saved. So I'm ending this. Here. Now. Elira, listen to me. Elira's voice was steady, calm. The voice of someone who had accepted what came next. You're a good king. Better than this empire deserves. But you're not a miracle worker. You can't cure genetics with power. You can't stop biology with authority. The curse is happening. In 6 months, or 6 days, or 6 hours. I don't know when. But it's coming. Then we face it together. No, we don't. Because if you're there when I transform, you'll try to control it, try to contain it. And the council will use that. They'll use me against you. Turn your love into a weapon that destroys everything you've built. I won't let that happen. You don't get to make that choice. I'm the one dying. I'm the only one who gets to make that choice. Arden's hands found her shoulders, gripped hard enough to hurt. You're not dying. You're running. And I won't let you. You don't have a choice. I'm the king. I always have a choice. Not this time. Elira moved fast, faster than he expected. Her hand went to the knife strapped to her thigh. She didn't draw it, just touched it. A reminder that she was armed, that she was willing, that she had become something he didn't recognize. Arden's eyes went to her hand, then back to her face, reading the truth there. You're serious, completely. You'd fight me? Your own husband? To survive? Yes. The admission cracked something in his expression. Not anger. Something worse. Heartbreak disguised as fury. Here's what people don't understand about love in a world built on power. It's not soft. It's not gentle. Love between predators is teeth and claws, and the constant calculation of who would win if it came to violence. And when you love someone who can destroy you, every tender moment carries the weight of potential annihilation. Arden loved her, she believed that, but his love was possession, control, the absolute conviction that what was his should remain his regardless of consent or consequence. And Elira's love had become survival, which meant one of them would have to break. I could stop you. Arden's voice was low, dangerous. I'm stronger, faster. I could drag you back to the capital in chains if I had to. You could. Elira kept her hand on the knife. But you won't. Why not? Because you love me. And love means letting go when holding on causes more damage than loss. That's not love. That's surrender. Maybe they're the same thing. They're not. Then prove it. Elira stepped closer, close enough to feel his breath on her face. Let me go. Let me disappear. Let me face this on my terms instead of the council's. Give me that much. And watch you transform alone. Watch you lose yourself with no one there to, what? Hold your hand? Witness it? That's not mercy. That's cruelty. It's freedom, the only kind I'll ever have. Arden's hands moved from her shoulders to her face, cupping her jaw. His touch was gentle now, desperate. I can't lose you. You already have. You just haven't accepted it yet. The truth landed like a blade between ribs. Arden stared at her, his eyes searching for the woman he'd married, finding only a stranger who wore her face. When did you stop loving me? His voice was barely a whisper. I didn't. Elira's throat tightened. I never stopped. But love isn't enough to fix this. Love can't cure curses or change biology or rewrite the rules the council set before we ever met. All love can do is make losing each other hurt more. Then let it hurt. Arden pulled her against him, hard, desperate, a drowning man clutching wreckage. Let it hurt and fight anyway. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. Not this time. Elira pushed back, creating distance, her hand still on the knife. Behind them, footsteps echoed in the main tunnel. Kale's voice calling out, Your Majesties? Is everything all right? Time was running out. Elira made her choice. She pulled the knife. Arden's eyes went wide. Not with fear, with betrayal. Don't! His voice was command and plea mixed into one desperate word. I'm sorry. Elira drove the knife toward him. Not to kill, to disable. A strike aimed at his shoulder, meant to wound enough that he couldn't follow immediately, but not enough to cause permanent damage. But Arden was alpha, and alphas didn't go down easy. He moved, faster than she anticipated. His hand caught her wrist, twisted. The knife clattered to stone. His other hand went to her throat, not squeezing, just holding, a reminder of strength, of dominance, of all the ways he could stop her if he chose. They stood frozen. King and queen. Predator and prey. Love and violence tangled so tight it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Arden's eyes were dark, feral, the alpha rising to meet the threat. Don't make me hurt you, he said quietly. Then let me go. I can't. The footsteps grew closer. Kael would be here in seconds. The moment would pass. The opportunity would die. Elira did the only thing she could. She headbutted him, hard, straight into his nose. Cartilage crunched. Blood exploded across both their faces. Arden's grip loosened. He stumbled back, shock and pain warring across his features. Elira didn't wait. She ran. Into the abandoned shaft, into darkness, into the network of tunnels she had memorized. Her feet found purchase on uneven stone. Her hands touched walls to guide her, She moved by memory and desperation. Behind her, Arden's roar shook the tunnel. Not words, pure alpha rage. The sound of a predator who had just lost prey he considered his. The sound echoed off stone walls, multiplied, became a physical force that rattled her bones and made dust rain from the ceiling. This wasn't the controlled king who ruled empires. This was the beast underneath, the primal thing that preceded civilization and would outlast it. This was what alphas became when you took something that belonged to them. Dangerous, unstoppable, absolutely committed to reclaiming what was lost. Elira ran faster. The tunnel branched. She took the left fork, then right, then left again. Navigating by the map in her mind, praying it was accurate, praying the passages hadn't collapsed since the schematics were drawn, praying she could disappear before Arden's fury turned into hunt. She could hear them behind her. Multiple footsteps now. Kael, guards, Arden, coming, always coming, because that's what alphas did. They hunted, they claimed, they never, ever let go. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, an old excavation site, long abandoned. The ceiling was cracked, water dripped from fissures. The air smelled wrong. Bad. The kind of bad that said this place was one sharp sound away from collapse. Elira spotted the secondary exit, a narrow shaft that led up toward the surface, toward the forest beyond Thornhaven, toward freedom or death, or transformation, or all three. She made it 3 steps before Kael appeared in front of her. Not behind, in front. He'd predicted her route, cut her off. His pale eyes were cold, emotionless, the professional doing his job. Don't, he said quietly. I have to. No, you don't. Kael moved closer, blocking the exit. You think running solves this? It doesn't. It just makes the end worse, harder, more painful. At least in the capital, you'd have medical care. Resources. Some measure of comfort. I don't want comfort. I want control. Control is an illusion, especially for people like us. Then what do you have? Acceptance. Kael's expression didn't change. I accepted a long time ago that I'm a weapon, a tool, something the Empire uses until I break, and when I break, they'll replace me. There's freedom in that acceptance. No expectations, no disappointment, just function until failure. That's not freedom, that's despair. Maybe. But it keeps me alive. I don't want to be alive like that. Then you want to be dead, because those are the only options this empire offers. Behind them, Arden's voice echoed through the tunnels. Elira. The sound was raw, broken, a king reduced to a man screaming his wife's name in the dark. It was the sound of something fundamental shattering. Not just a marriage, not just trust, but the entire framework Arden had built his identity around. He was the Alpha King, the one who controlled everything, who bent nations to his will, who had never lost anything he truly wanted to keep, and now he was losing the only thing that mattered, not because of war or rebellion or political maneuvering, but because the woman he loved would rather die free than live as his weapon. That realization would destroy him, or remake him into something worse. Kael's head tilted slightly. Listening, assessing. He's coming, Kael said, and when he gets here, he will stop you. By force if necessary. Is that what you want? To make him hurt you to save you? Elira's hand went to her empty thigh where the knife had been. No weapon, no leverage, just desperation and the crumbling architecture of a plan falling apart. Let me pass. Can't do that. Then kill me. Right here. Right now. Make it quick. Kael's expression finally shifted. Not pity, something else. Recognition, maybe. The acknowledgement of one weapon to another. He stepped aside. Elira stared at him, not understanding why. Because you're right, Kael said quietly. Control is better than comfort, and you deserve to choose your own end, even if that choice is just which direction you run before the inevitable catches you. The footsteps were closer now, seconds away. Go, Kael said. Before I remember, I'm supposed to be loyal. Elira didn't need to be told twice. She ran for the secondary shaft. She grabbed the first rung of the ladder built into the stone, started climbing. The rungs were slick with moisture, old, some loose in their moorings. But she didn't slow down. Hand over hand, feet finding purchase, climbing toward the shrinking circle of gray light above. Below, Arden burst into the chamber, his eyes wild, blood still streaming from his broken nose. He looked like something primal, stripped of civilization, just rage and loss, an alpha instinct demanding he reclaim what was his. His gaze found her on the ladder, 20 feet up, climbing toward light. "Elira!" The roar shook loose stones from the ceiling. The entire chamber trembled. Cracks spread across the walls like lightning frozen in stone. Kale put a hand on Arden's chest, stopping him. "Sire, let her go." Arden's hand went to Kale's throat. Fast, brutal. Alpha strength closing around windpipe. Move or die. Kale didn't fight, just met Arden's eyes. Even with fingers crushing his airway, his voice came out steady. "If you go after her now, you'll force a confrontation neither of you will survive. She's armed with desperation. You're armed with fury. That combination in a collapsing mind means you both die. Is that what you want?" "I want my wife." "Your wife is running because staying means transformation. You chase her. You accelerate what you're trying to prevent. Let her run. Let her think she's free. Then we track her. Bring her back on our terms. Not in a collapsed mind with witnesses watching their king lose control." The logic penetrated. Barely. Arden's grip loosened, his eyes never leaving Elira's form as she climbed higher, disappearing into darkness. "How long before you can find her?" "Hours. Maybe less. She's running blind. We have trackers, resources. She has desperation and a head start. The math isn't in her favor." "Then find her." Arden's voice was gravel and broken glass. "I don't care how many men it takes. I don't care what it costs. Find her and bring her back." "Yes, sire." "Alive, Kyle. Always. Unharmed." "That might be harder. She just broke your nose and ran. The men will be motivated to use force." "Then motivate them differently." Arden released Kale's throat. "Tell them anyone who harms her answers to me personally, and make sure they understand what that means." Kale nodded, understood. Elira reached the top of the shaft, emerged into gray daylight. Forest surrounded her, dense, dark, the kind of wilderness where you could disappear, or die trying. Her lungs burned, her hands bled from the rough stone. Her face was sticky with Arden's blood mixed with her own sweat, but she was out. She was free. For now. She ran into the forest, no direction, no plan, just movement away from the mine, away from Arden, away from the empire that wanted to weaponize her transformation. Behind her, deep in the earth, Arden stood in a crumbling chamber and made his choice. He would hunt. He would find her. He would drag her back to the capital if he had to burn every forest and level every mountain between here and there. Because he was Alpha, and Alphas never let go. Not because they were evil, not because they were cruel, but because letting go meant admitting they couldn't protect what they loved. And alphas who couldn't protect became alphas who couldn't lead. And alphas who couldn't lead became prey themselves. So Arden would hunt, not out of malice, out of fear. Fear that without her, he would become exactly what the Empire had always suspected he was, underneath the crown and the control and the carefully maintained image of invincibility. Just a man, mortal, breakable, alone. The hunt had begun, and only one of them would survive it whole. The other would either die, or become the weapon they'd been running from all along. The forest swallowed Elira whole, dense canopy blocking what little light struggled through Thornhaven's perpetual smoke. Roots like gnarled fingers waiting to trip. Undergrowth thick enough to hide or trap, depending on luck and timing. She ran until her lungs screamed, until her legs threatened mutiny, until the mine entrance was nothing but memory behind her. Then she ran further, because distance wasn't measured in miles when you were being hunted by an Alpha King. It was measured in time, in the precious seconds between escape and recapture, between freedom and the inevitable moment when superior resources and unlimited fury closed the gap. Elira knew the mathematics. Arden had trackers, hounds, men who could follow scent through rain and fog and forests so dense you couldn't see 3 feet ahead. She had desperation and a diminishing head start. The equation didn't favor her survival, but survival wasn't the point anymore. Control was. The choice of how she ended, where she ended, on her terms instead of theirs. That was worth running for, worth dying for. She found a stream, shallow, fast-moving, cold enough to steal breath. She waded in without hesitation, water to her knees, then her thighs, following the current downstream. The oldest trick. The most obvious. But obvious sometimes worked because people overthought it. Or it failed spectacularly because obvious was the first thing they checked. Either way, she was committed. The stream led deeper into the forest, away from Thornhaven, away from roads and civilization and the carefully mapped territories where the Empire's reach was absolute. Out here, control dissolved. Laws became suggestions. Power meant less than knowing which plants were poison and which would keep you alive another day. Elira had no idea which was which. She'd spent 5 years in a palace. Before that, her life had been carefully curated garden parties and diplomatic training. Survival skills weren't part of the curriculum for women being groomed to wear crowns, because crowns weren't supposed to need survival skills. They were supposed to be protected, cherished, kept safe in gilded cages until their genetic purpose activated and transformed them into weapons. The water numbed her legs, made each step uncertain, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, the mantra of people who had nothing left except forward momentum. She didn't know how long she walked. Time lost meaning. The forest canopy was too thick to track the sun's position. Her body screamed for rest, but rest meant being caught. So she pushed through the pain, through the exhaustion, through the growing realization that she had no destination, no plan beyond run until you can't, and then see what happens next. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was hers. The stream widened, deepened, became something closer to a river. The current stronger now, pulling at her legs, trying to sweep her feet out from under her. Elira climbed onto the bank, her clothes soaked, her boots waterlogged. She was shivering, not from cold, from adrenaline wearing off, from the body's belated recognition that it had been pushed past reasonable limits. She needed fire, shelter, food. She had none of those things. What she had was wet clothes and the sound of hounds baying in the distance. They'd found her trail, faster than she'd expected, more efficient than she'd hoped. The Empire's resources mobilized with terrifying speed once an Alpha King gave the order. Find her. Bring her back. Alive. The last word was probably the only thing keeping her breathing. Arden wanted her alive, which meant the trackers couldn't kill her, couldn't hurt her too badly, had to maintain some measure of restraint even as they closed in. But restraint was relative, and definitions of harm varied depending on who was doing the defining. Elira forced herself to move. Off the riverbank, into denser undergrowth. Thorns tore at her clothes. Branches slapped her face. The forest fought her every step. But she pushed through, because stopping meant capture. And capture meant transformation on the Council's terms. She'd rather die. The thought crystallized. Simple, clear. If it came down to capture or death, she'd choose death. Quick, final. Denying them the weapon they'd spent generations breeding. It was the only victory available to someone with no power except the power to refuse. The baying grew louder, closer. The hounds were good, trained to track through water and wind and every trick desperate prey might attempt. And the men following them were better. Professional hunters who served the Empire because the Empire paid well and asked few questions about methods. Elira's lungs burned. Her legs were lead. She couldn't run much further, which meant she needed to make a stand. Here. Now. Before exhaustion made the choice for her. She found a clearing, small, ringed by ancient trees whose roots had broken through the earth like grasping fingers. The ground was soft, covered in moss. It would have been beautiful under different circumstances. Now it just looked like a good place to die. Elira turned to face the direction she'd come from, her back to the largest tree, hands empty of weapons, just her body and her will and the absolute conviction that she would not be taken alive. The hounds burst through the undergrowth first. Massive beasts, black and gray, bred for tracking and intimidation. They surrounded her, snarling but not attacking, trained to corner, to hold, not to kill. Behind them came the hunters. 6 men, armed with crossbows and nets. Professional, efficient. They fanned out in a semicircle, blocking every escape route. The lead hunter was a scarred man with eyes like chips of flint. He studied Elira with the detached assessment of someone evaluating livestock. Your Majesty. His voice carried no respect. Just professional courtesy. You need to come with us. No, the king gave orders. You're to be brought back unharmed. Then you have a problem, because I'm not going back. And the only way you're taking me is dead. Can't do that. Orders are clear, alive and unharmed. Then we're at an impasse. The hunter's expression didn't change. We have nets, tranquilizers, ways to take you without permanent damage. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Harder than it needs to be. As if abducting a queen was just another job, another task to complete before dinner. The casual brutality of it was almost impressive. No malice, no cruelty, just function, purpose. The absolute conviction that following orders absolved you of moral responsibility. This is what the Empire did to people, turned them into tools, mechanisms, parts in a machine so large that individual conscience became irrelevant. You didn't question, you didn't rebel, you just performed your assigned role and collected your pay and went home feeling nothing. It was efficient, it was sustainable, it was monstrous. If you come near me, Elira said quietly, I'll fight. I'll make you hurt me to take me. And when the king asks why his queen is bruised and bloody, you'll have to explain that she preferred violence to capture. How do you think that conversation goes? The hunter's jaw tightened. We'll be careful. You'll fail, because I won't make this easy. I won't make this clean. I'll force you to damage what you're trying to protect. And that damage will be on you. It was a bluff, mostly. She was exhausted, unarmed. 6 trained hunters against 1 desperate queen. The mathematics were brutal, but mathematics didn't account for will, for the kind of determination that came from having nothing left to lose. The hunters exchanged glances, uncertain now. Their job was to retrieve the queen intact. But intact was a spectrum, and if she fought hard enough, that spectrum shifted toward unacceptable. Stand down, a new voice said from the trees. Everyone turned. Ardeen stepped into the clearing. He looked like something that had crawled out of a nightmare. His face was a mask of dried blood from his broken nose, his clothes torn from pushing through undergrowth, his eyes wild with something that transcended rage and circled back to cold purpose. But he was here. He'd tracked her himself, left the mine, the security, the carefully controlled environment. Come into the wilderness alone to face the woman who'd shattered his nose and his trust in one brutal headbutt. The hunters backed away immediately. This wasn't their fight anymore. This was between alpha and mate, between king and queen, between 2 people whose love had become indistinguishable from war. Ardeen dismissed them with a gesture. Leave us. Sire, the lead hunter started, the king's orders. I am the king, and I'm changing the orders. Leave, now. They melted into the forest, taking the hounds, taking the nets and tranquilizers and all the tools of civilized capture, leaving just 2 people in a clearing surrounded by trees older than empires. Elira and Ardeen faced each other across 10 feet of moss-covered ground. Neither moved, neither spoke. The silence stretched, became its own presence, heavy with everything unsaid over 5 years of carefully performed marriage. Finally, Ardeen broke it. You broke my nose. You tried to stop me. I tried to save you. Same thing. Not even close. Ardeen took a step forward. Elira tensed. He stopped. Hands raised. Palms out. I'm not here to fight. Then why are you here? To talk. We talked. In the mine. Right before I headbutted you and ran. We yelled. We accused. We didn't talk. Ardeen's voice was rough. Strained. Not from the broken nose. From something deeper. I need you to understand something. Understand what? That you love me? That you'd burn the Empire to save me? You already said that. Actions speak louder, and your actions are hunting me through a forest with trackers and hounds. Because you ran. What was I supposed to do? Let you disappear? Let you transform alone in the wilderness? Die alone? Yes! The word exploded out of her, raw, furious, years of compressed rage detonating in a single syllable. Yes, she repeated. Quieter now. More controlled. That's exactly what you should do. Let me go. Let me choose my own end. Stop trying to save something that doesn't want to be saved. You want to be saved. You're just too scared to admit it. Don't tell me what I want. You don't get to define my desires anymore. You don't get to claim you know me better than I know myself. That's what the council did. That's what everyone does. Decide what the queen wants, what she needs, what's best for her, without ever asking her. I'm asking now. Too late. It's never too late. It is when you have 6 months to live. Elira's voice cracked. When every day brings you closer to transformation. When you can feel yourself disappearing piece by piece. You want to save me, Arden? You can't. This is genetic, cellular, written into my blood before I took my first breath. Love doesn't cure that. Power doesn't cure that. Nothing cures that. Then we manage it. We prepare. We find a way to what? Weaponize me efficiently? Train the beast I'll become? Use me against your enemies? That's the Council's plan. What makes yours different? Because mine keeps you alive. No, it keeps something alive. But it won't be me. The transformation erases memory, strips personality, leaves just instinct and rage. I'll be a beast wearing my face. That's not survival. That's a living death. Arden flinched, the first crack in his composure. So you'd rather actual death. I'd rather control. The when, the where, the how. I'd rather die as myself than live as their weapon. Even if living meant we'd still have time together, even if I could give you 6 more months of consciousness, of memory, of being you, 6 months in a cage waiting for execution, that's not time, that's torture. 6 months with me. The words hung between them, soft, desperate, the kind of plea that cost an alpha king everything to voice. Because alphas didn't beg. They commanded. They dominated. They took what they wanted through force or fear or political maneuvering. But here was Arden, reduced to asking, to hoping, to offering the only thing he had left, himself, his presence in her final months, as if love could make the unbearable bearable. Elira felt something crack inside her chest. Not hope. She'd lost that weeks ago. Something else. The last wall between anger and grief, between fury and heartbreak. She'd loved him once, maybe still did, underneath the rage and betrayal and desperate need to escape. Love didn't die just because circumstances became impossible. It just transformed into something harder to recognize, something that hurt more than hate. I can't go back, she said quietly. I can't walk into that palace knowing everyone's waiting for me to transform. Watching, measuring, preparing. I can't be the weapon they bred me to be. Then don't be. Arden took another step closer. We leave. Tonight. Abandon the capital, the council, all of it. We disappear into territories so remote the Empire's reach doesn't extend. We live whatever time you have left on our terms. Not theirs. You'd give up your throne? For you? Without hesitation. The declaration should have felt romantic. Instead, it felt like watching a man commit suicide by sacrifice. Because Arden was the throne. Strip away the crown, and what remained? A man defined entirely by power, suddenly powerless. That kind of identity collapse didn't create freedom. It created chaos. And chaos destroyed everyone it touched. You say that now, Elira said. But 6 months from now, when I'm transformed and you're exiled and everything you built is ash, will you still think it was worth it? Yes, you don't know that. I do, because I've spent 5 years building an empire. And in 5 minutes of you being gone, I understood something fundamental. Empires are replaceable. You're not. Pretty words. But words don't change biology. No. But they change choices. Arden closed the remaining distance between them, stood close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the fear underneath the determination. I'm not asking you to go back to the capital. I'm asking you to let me stay with you. Here. Wherever. However much time remains. Let me be there. Not as your king, as your husband. The distinction mattered. King meant authority. Control. The weight of empire dictating every decision. Husband meant partnership, equality, 2 people facing the impossible together. It was a pretty illusion, but Elira was tired of fighting, tired of running, tired of carrying the weight of survival alone. Maybe illusions were enough. Maybe choosing how you spent your final months mattered more than the inevitable end. She met his eyes, saw genuine terror there, not of death, of loss, of watching her transform and being powerless to stop it. They were the same fear. Different faces on the same nightmare. If I let you stay, she said carefully, you don't get to save me. You don't get to cure me. You don't get to fix this. All you get is time, however much is left. Can you live with that? No. Arden's voice was flat, honest. But I'll try. The admission was more valuable than false promises, more real than optimistic lies. Elira reached out. Her hand found his face, traced the line of his broken nose, the dried blood, the physical evidence of the violence between them. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I made hurting me the only option. They stood together in the clearing, two people who had loved each other wrong, who had confused possession with devotion, control with care, who had built a marriage on performances and expectations and the weight of crowns that allowed no vulnerability. And now, stripped of palace and protocol and the empire's expectations, they were just two people trying to figure out if love could survive when everything else had fallen apart. The answer wasn't clear, but they had time to find out, however much time remained. Elira felt it first. 3 weeks after they'd disappeared into the deep forest. After they'd found an abandoned hunter's cabin and made it home. After Arden had proven he could build fires and hunt game and function without servants anticipating his every need. After they'd settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal if you ignored the genetic time bomb ticking down inside her body. She woke before dawn, her skin burning. Not fever. Something else. Something that crawled under her flesh like insects seeking exit. Her wolf stirred. Not the absence she'd grown accustomed to. Actual presence. Actual consciousness rising from wherever it had been sleeping. No, not sleeping. Waiting. Elira's breath came in short gasps. Her hand shook. She could feel it. The transformation beginning. Not sudden, not violent, just inexorable. Like a door opening that could never be closed. Arden woke immediately. Alpha instincts sensing distress. His hand found hers in the darkness. What's wrong? It's starting. 2 words. Simple. Final. The announcement of the end. Arden went very still. How long? I don't know. Hours maybe. Days if I'm lucky. He didn't waste time on denial or false hope. Just pulled her against him. Held her while her body began the process of erasing who she was. They stayed like that until sunrise. Not speaking. Just existing in the shrinking space between Elira the woman and whatever came after. When light finally crept through the cabin's cracks, Arden pulled back to look at her. His eyes were dry. Alpha's didn't cry, but the devastation in his expression was more eloquent than tears. What do you need? Elira thought about it, ran through options, considered possibilities. What she needed was impossible. What she wanted was simple. I want you to leave. Arden's jaw tightened. No, I don't want you here when it happens. When I stop being me. I don't want that to be your last memory. I'm not leaving you alone. You have to. Elira's voice was steady, calm, the voice of someone who'd made peace with the inevitable. Because when I transform, I'll be dangerous, unpredictable. I might hurt you. I might kill you. And I won't let that happen. I can handle... You can't handle a sovereign beast. Nobody can. That's the point. That's why the council wanted this. Ultimate weapon. Uncontrollable except by whoever masters it first. And I won't let that be you. I won't let you try to dominate what I become. Won't let you see me as something to be conquered. Then what do you want me to see you as? Human. Flawed. Someone who fought as hard as she could and lost anyway. Remember me like that, not as the thing that comes after. The transformation took 3 days. Not all at once. In waves. Periods of lucidity between episodes of something else. Something that wore her face but thought in patterns she didn't recognize. Responded to stimuli she couldn't name. Existed in a state between woman and beast that belonged to neither. Arden stayed despite her demands. Witnessed every moment, every degradation, every instance of her humanity slipping away like water through fingers. He learned what love looked like when it couldn't save, when all it could do was witness. On the 3rd day, Elira's consciousness surfaced one final time. A moment of clarity in the chaos. She found Arden sitting across the cabin, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow with the weight of watching someone die by degrees. She tried to speak. Her voice came out wrong. Not quite human anymore, but close enough that words were possible. Thank you for staying. Arden crossed to her, knelt beside where she lay. His hand found hers. I'm not leaving until you do. I already left. This is just the aftermath. You're still here. I can see you. Not for long. Elira's grip tightened on his hand. When I'm completely gone, when there's nothing left but the beast, I need you to do something. Anything. Let me go. Don't try to control it. Don't try to use it. Just let it run into the forest and disappear. Let the council's weapon become nothing but a ghost story. That's the only victory left. Arden's voice was rough. I can't just... You can. You have to. It's the last thing I'll ever ask you. The transformation completed at sunset. Elira's final moment of consciousness was watching Arden's face blur as her vision changed, as her mind restructured itself around instincts she'd never had before, as everything that made her human dissolved into something primal. The beast that emerged was magnificent, terrible, exactly what the Council had engineered over generations of selective breeding and genetic manipulation. It stood in the cabin, confused, powerful, aware that something had changed but unable to articulate what. Arden faced it. The creature that wore his wife's features, that carried her scent, that looked at him with eyes that held no recognition. He understood what she'd asked him to do. Let it go. Don't try to master it. Don't turn it into the weapon the Council wanted. It was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Harder than conquering kingdoms. Harder than building empires. Harder than making decisions that cost thousands of lives. He opened the cabin door. The beast hesitated, then moved. Slowly at first, then faster. It passed within inches of Arden, close enough to kill, close enough to claim. But it didn't. It just ran. Into the forest. Into the growing darkness. Into wilderness so deep that empires couldn't follow. Arden stood in the doorway, watching it disappear. Watching the last piece of Elira vanish into trees and shadow. He didn't follow. Didn't try to track it, didn't send hunters or hounds or use any of the resources that could bring it back. He just let it go. Because that's what love looked like, when you finally understood it wasn't about possession. It was about honoring someone's choices even when those choices destroyed you. Arden returned to the capital 3 months later. A different man. Harder in some ways, softer in others. The kind of transformation that came from losing everything and discovering what remained. The Council expected him to be broken, devastated, easy to manipulate in his grief. They miscalculated. Arden called an emergency session, demanded answers about the Queen's bloodline, the curse, the generations of women transformed into weapons. The Council tried deflection, tried political maneuvering, tried reminding him that empires required sacrifice. Arden had them arrested, every member, charged with treason, conspiracy, murder across 6 generations. The trials were brutal, public, the kind of spectacle that rewrote history in real time. Evidence was presented, records unsealed. The truth about what the empire had done to its queens exposed to sunlight that killed like poison. Half the council was executed, the rest exiled, the bloodline breeding program dismantled. Laws enacted that made genetic manipulation for military purposes a capital crime. It didn't bring Elira back. But it meant no other woman would face what she'd faced. It meant her death brought change instead of just continuing a cycle. That was something. Not enough, but something. Arden never remarried, never took another queen. He ruled alone for 37 more years, built an empire that valued consent over control, that measured success not by expansion, but by how many people chose to stay versus how many were forced. He was considered a good king, a just king. The kind of ruler who proved that power could serve something beyond itself. But those who knew him best said he always seemed to be looking for something, as if he'd lost a piece of himself in the northern forests and spent the rest of his life searching for it. They weren't wrong. Some nights, when the palace was quiet and the weight of the crown became too heavy, Arden would stand by the window and stare toward the northern territories, wondering if somewhere in those forests a beast still ran. Wondering if some fragment of Elira remained, wondering if she knew what her sacrifice had accomplished. He never found out, but he spent the rest of his life making sure it mattered, because that's what love looked like after everything else burned away. Not possession, not salvation, just witness, and the absolute commitment to honor what was lost by becoming something better than what remained. The empire endured, changed. evolved into something that would have been unrecognizable to the council that had built it on exploitation and genetic engineering. And somewhere in the deep forests, stories spread of a silver beast, magnificent and terrible. That appeared during full moons and disappeared before dawn. That protected travelers, that destroyed bandits, that existed in the space between myth and reality. The people called it different names: the Ghost Queen, the Forest Guardian, the Beast of the Northern Wilds. But Arden knew what it was, who it was, and every story that reached the capital, every reported sighting, every whispered legend he collected like prayers, evidence that some part of Elira survived. Not the woman he'd married, but something that carried her essence into a future she'd helped create. It wasn't the ending they'd wanted, but it was the ending they'd earned. And in a world built on sacrifice and control and the absolute conviction that power meant dominance, maybe that was the only kind of ending possible. Two people who loved each other wrong until they learned to love each other right. And by then it was too late for anything except memory and change, and the hope that maybe love's true purpose wasn't to last forever, but to transform everything it touched into something better than what came before, even if that transformation cost everything. Especially then,